The current crown prince held my legitimate elder sister in his arms and humiliated me in public. A lowly concubine, born daughter is only fit to carry my shoes. Don't even think about the position of principal consort. My legitimate elder sister nestled in his embrace, laughing so hard her whole body shook, her eyes full of mockery toward me. The entire hall burst into laughter, all watching me, this joke who didn't know her place. Just then, the emperor, drunk, granted me a favor, allowing me to choose my own husband. The crown prince was certain I would cry and beg him to take me in, his face full of impatience, but I stepped past him and trembling, pointed toward the most noble man in all the land on the dragon throne. Your Majesty, this subject's daughter does not choose a prince, I wish to choose you. In that moment, the wine cup in the crown prince's hand shattered on the floor. Wait, we gotta talk about this opening. Chef's kiss, this is what I mean by a burn the boats moment. Girl looked at her scumbag ex, looked at his dad and said, you know what? I am upgrading. That boldness. That vision. I am obsessed with this strategically minded queen. The greatest victory banquet since the founding of the dynasty was held in Jiayang Hall, resplendent and magnificent, wine cups clinking everywhere. As a concubine, born daughter of the Grand Tutor's household, I had the honor of accompanying my legitimate elder sister Shen Mingyue to attend. I sat in the corner at the very end, quiet as a speck of dust. Crown Prince Xiaoqie, holding a wine cup, staggered over to my legitimate elder sister's side. His handsome face carried a hint of intoxication, yet his gaze toward Shen Mingyue was full of adoration. Mingyue, once I pacify the Western Territory, I'll petition Father Emperor to marry you as my principal consort with an 8-bearer palanquin. Shen Mingyue shyly lowered her head, her face like a peach blossom. Your Highness. All the civil and military officials rose to offer congratulations. The atmosphere filled with joy. Father, Grand Tutor Shen Tingyuan, was especially gratified, smiling from ear to ear. I lowered my head and took a sip of the fruit wine before me. This wine was truly bitter. Xiaoqie's gaze suddenly shot toward me like a sharp arrow. Shen Mingyue beside him also raised her head at just the right moment, a barely perceptible smugness in her eyes. Shen Weian. Xiaoqie called me by my full name, his tone full of contempt. I slowly set down my wine cup and rose to bow. This subject is here. He looked me up and down, as if appraising a piece of merchandise. I heard you also harbor feelings for me. At these words, the great hall instantly fell silent. Countless gazes fell upon me in unison, probing, disdainful, and gleefully anticipating the spectacle. My cheeks instantly burned. Shen Mingyue gently tugged at Xiaoqie's sleeve, softly persuading him. Your Highness, you've had too much to drink. My sister, I haven't had too much. Xiaoqie shook off her hand, his gaze growing even colder. I am going to make her give up on this idea today. He walked up to me, looking down at me from his high position. A lowly concubine, born daughter is only fit to carry my shoes. Don't even think about the position of primary consort. In my heart there will only ever be Mingyu. As soon as he finished speaking, Shen Mingyue snuggled into his arms, laughing so hard she was trembling, her eyes full of mockery toward me. Your Highness, you are so bad. The entire hall erupted in roaring laughter. Father Shen Tingyuan's face turned ashen, but he didn't dare lose his temper. I stood there like a clown stripped naked, enduring everyone's ridicule. My nails dug deep into my palms, bringing a sharp, piercing pain. This is the person I've loved for 10 years. This is the sister I grew up with. They trampled my sincere heart underfoot and crushed it to pieces. Okay, I have to pause here because I am seriously pissed off. You know what, when I was writing this humiliation scene, I had to stop and punch my pillow, like this man's shamelessness, exposing someone's crush in public just to humiliate her, and the sisters laughing on the side. If he wasn't the male lead's son, I'd write him getting food poisoning right now. But what can I do? The plot needs it. Sparing his life for now. On the dragon throne, Emperor Shao Jingyuan seemed drunk too. Watching this farce, he suddenly burst out laughing. Interesting. 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 As soon as he spoke, the hall immediately fell silent. The little girl from the Shen family. Is she called Shen Weian? I knelt down, my voice trembling slightly from nervousness. Yes, this subject's daughter is Shen Weian. Lift your head, let me see. I raised my head as instructed. The man on the dragon throne, though nearing his 40s, was still imposing and extraordinary. With a pair of deep eyes that seemed to see through one's heart, he looked at me for a long while, then took another gulp of wine. Very well, today is a joyous occasion. I shall grant you a favor. I allow you to choose your own husband, princes or nobles, take your pick, whoever you fancy. I shall bestow the marriage upon you. As soon as these words were spoken, the entire hall erupted in commotion. Xiaoqie's expression instantly became extremely unpleasant, his face full of impatience. He was certain that after such humiliation, my only choice would be to tearfully beg him to take me in. After all, Who would dare want a woman publicly rejected by the crown prince? Shen Mingyue also looked at me with a victor's attitude, as if saying, see, in the end you still have to beg us. Father in the distance desperately signaled me with his eyes, telling me to quickly apologize to the crown prince. I took a deep breath and stood up from the ground. Everyone thought I would walk toward Xiaoche instead. I passed him by step, walking toward that supreme sovereign. I stopped 3 steps away from the dragon throne and knelt down again, all eyes in the hall focused on me. I asked timidly, Your Majesty, must I only choose a prince? Xiao Jingyuan clearly didn't expect me to ask this. He was puzzled. Who do you want to choose? Under everyone's gaze, I tremblingly raised my hand, past all the civil and military officials, past Xiao Chao and Shen Mingyue's shocked faces, pointing at that man sitting upright on the dragon throne, the most noble man in the world. Your Majesty, this subject does not choose a prince. I want to choose you. The moment my words fell, the entire Jiaoyang hall became deathly silent. You could hear a pin drop. Everyone thought they were hearing things. The air seemed to freeze. Every face filled with shock and disbelief. A lowly concubine-born daughter, at a victory banquet, proposing marriage to the reigning emperor. How utterly absurd. How incredibly audacious. Crash. A crisp sound broke the suffocating silence. It was Crown Prince Xiao Che accidentally shattering the glass cup in his hand. Dark red wine mixed with shattered glass, splashed all over his hand, yet he seemed oblivious, staring at me intently, his eyes looking like they wanted to tear me apart alive. Shen Wayne, you've lost your mind. Shen Mingyue also turned pale with shock, covering her mouth, unable to believe what she'd heard. Father Shen Tingyuan's vision went dark, nearly fainting on the spot. His body swayed, supported by an official beside him. He pointed at me, his lips trembling, unable to utter a single word. It is over. This was the only thought in everyone's mind. This illegitimate daughter who doesn't know her place has not only ruined herself but will also implicate the entire Grand Tutor's manor. However, I just knelt there quietly, my spine straight as a rod. I am not crazy. I am perfectly lucid. From the moment Xiao Che publicly humiliated me, I understood that my way out was already cut off. If I cry and beg him, he'll treat me like a dog. If I turn and leave, I'll become the laughingstock of the entire capital city, living the rest of my life under everyone's pointing fingers and gossip. Either way, it is a dead end. If that is the case, why not make a big gamble, seek life through death? What I am betting on is the emperor's dignity, the weight of his golden words and jade decrees, and even more, his current drunkenness. And that fleeting glimmer of interest in his eyes. The lofty emperor who has everything may lack precisely this kind of excitement that breaks the monotony. I've staked my own life, along with the entire Shen family's honor and disgrace, on this high-stakes gamble. On the dragon throne, the drunkenness in Xiao Jingyuan's eyes seemed to dissipate somewhat. He didn't fly into a rage as everyone expected. Instead, he looked at me with interest, like watching an ant that had wandered into a chess game. Oh, he drew out his tone, his voice deep and authoritative. Give me a reason. Why choose me? The opportunity has come. I steadied my mind, raised my head, and met his probing gaze. Tears welled up in my eyes, but my voice was clear and firm. Because your Majesty is the Son of Heaven, the most noble man in this world. And only your Majesty can dispel the humiliation I suffered today. This subject's status is humble. I dare not hope for a title. I only wish for a place to shelter, to no longer be bullied by anyone. Under heaven, all land belongs to the emperor. Only by your Majesty's side is the most secure place. These words were both flattery and a reminder to him, reminding him that I was driven to desperation because I was humiliated by his son, reminding him that it was his own promise of grace. If he goes back on his word now and punishes me, where would the dignity of the Son of Heaven be? How would he handle the choose as you wish? He personally said. In the great hall, the atmosphere was still as tense as a fully drawn bowstring. Xiao Che's face had already turned from green to pale. He wanted to speak but was stopped by the emperor's cold glance. Shen Mingyue bit her lower lip tightly, her eyes full of venomous hatred as she looked at me. She never expected that not only did I not grovel to her, but I used this mutually destructive method to put everyone in checkmate. Xiao Jingyuan fell silent. He picked up the wine cup in front of him and drained it in one gulp. In his deep eyes, emotions shifted unpredictably, impossible for anyone to fathom. Time passed second by second, each second felt like slow torture. My back was already soaked through with cold sweat. Finally he spoke. You certainly have a sharp tongue. His tone revealed neither joy nor anger. He stood up and slowly descended the Imperial steps, stopping in front of me. A powerful sense of oppression hit me head on, carrying a faint scent of ambergris. Do you know what crime it is to deceive the emperor? I kowtowed to the ground, my forehead pressed tightly against the cold floor. This subject wouldn't dare. Everything this subject said is the truth. This subject's admiration for his majesty. The emperor is like the endless flowing waters of a great river. He suddenly let out a low laugh. The laughter echoed through the spacious hall, leaving everyone confused. Forget it, he uttered 2 words indifferently. Summonon come. Chief Eunuch Li Dequan from outside the hall immediately trotted in. Your Majesty, the Shen family's concubine-born daughter has lost her composure after drinking and spoken nonsense. Xiao Jingyuan's voice returned to its usual coldness and authority. Everyone's hearts tightened, thinking he would finally punish her. A flash of satisfaction crossed both Xiao Chai's and Shen Mingyue's eyes. Take her to the Qingxin Hall and let her sober up properly. Without my decree, no one is permitted to visit her. This command caught everyone off guard. Not a death sentence, not imprisonment, but taken to Qingxin Hall. Though remote, Qingxin Hall was still a palace building. What did this mean? Was it disguised confinement or some kind of unclear protection? No one dared to ask. Li Dequan bowed and accepted the order. This servant obeys your command. 2 young eunuchs stepped forward, supporting me from left and right. My legs had long gone numb from kneeling. I could barely stand. From start to finish, Xiao Jingxia never looked at me again. He turned and walked back to the dragon throne. As if everything just now was merely an insignificant farce, I was led away from Jiayang Hall. Behind me were the complex and strange gazes of the crowd, and Xiao Chai's eyes that seemed ready to kill. I knew that from the moment I pointed at the dragon throne, my life had completely spun out of control. What awaited me? I didn't know if it was an endless abyss or the 9th heaven. Qingxin Hall, a place that truly lived up to its name of clearing the heart of desires. The hall wasn't large, the furnishings simple, and the location extremely remote. Apart from an old maid in charge of cleaning, there was no one else. After I was brought here, no one came to check on me again. The evening breeze blew in through the window lattice, carrying a hint of coolness. I sat on the edge of the cold bed, yet my heart was calmer than ever before. The gamble has already begun, and I am that pawn that has crossed the river. I can only move forward, not backward. The night grew deeper. Suddenly, a rush of hurried footsteps came from outside the hall. Right after, the hall doors were violently pushed open. Father Shen Tingyuan, along with Mother Zhou, and my legitimate elder sister Shen Mingyue, stormed in furiously. The head eunuch tried to stop them, but father shoved him aside. Get lost. I am her father disciplining my own daughter who dares to stop me. He rushed up to me in a few steps, raising his hand to strike. I didn't dodge, I just lifted my eyes and looked at him coldly. The calmness and indifference in that gaze made his hand freeze in midair. You rebellious daughter. Shen Tingyuan trembled all over with rage. Do you know what kind of disaster you've caused? The Shen family's century-old reputation is going to be ruined by your hands. Mother Zhou also followed along, crying and wailing. Weian, how could you be so foolish? Quick, come back with us. Go kowtow to the crown prince and admit your mistake. Maybe there is still a sliver of hope. Shen Mingyue stood behind them, her eyes like poison-laced daggers. Little sister, what impressive tactics you have. To climb the social ladder, you don't even care about your own reputation or the family's lives. Are you satisfied now? The entire capital city will know that the Shen family produced a shameless lunatic. They spoke one after another, every sentence filled with accusations and curses, as if I wasn't their family, but a mortal enemy. If it were before, I might have cried, made excuses, begged for their forgiveness. But now, my heart had long been wounded beyond repair in Jiayang Hall, cold and hard as iron. I slowly stood up, looking at these 3 familiar yet strange faces before me. Are you done? My voice was soft yet carried a chill. All 3 of them froze. They hadn't expected that I, who had always been weak and obedient, would react this way. Father, mother, sister, I spoke slowly, my gaze sweeping over each of them. You are here now to find me. What do you want me to do? Go apologize to the crown prince, and then what? Let him treat me as a joke, take me into the Eastern Palace, and make me into something worse than a servant? Or should I take back my confession to His Majesty, and tell the entire court that I was mocking the emperor? My words were like sharp knives, stabbing at them. Shen Tingyuan's face went pale. He wasn't a fool. He naturally understood what was at stake. But you can't what? I cut him off. Father, at this point, do you think there is any other path to take? Those words, I said them in front of all the civil and military officials. The Imperial edict, His Majesty personally issued it this afternoon, ordering me to stay in Qingxin Hall with no visitors allowed. What do you mean by barging in here now? Do you think my crimes aren't serious enough, and you want to add another capital offense of defying the Imperial edict to the Shen family? Shen Tingyuan was left speechless by my retort, his old face turning the color of pig liver. Lady Zhou and Shen Mingyue also went pale. They only thought about coming here to condemn me and force me to submit. But they forgot that where I am now is the Imperial Palace. My every move is right under the Emperor's nose. Looking at their panicked expressions, I felt no satisfaction in my heart, only desolation. These are my relatives. When disaster strikes, they don't think about how to protect me, but how to push me out to protect themselves. Go back. I turned around, my voice carrying a trace of weariness. Before I drag you all down with me, stay away from me. From now on, my affairs have nothing to do with the Grand Tutor's manor anymore. This was the severance, the path I chose for myself after that humiliation in Jiayang Hall. Shen Tingyuan wanted to say something more but was held back by Shen Mingyue. She stared intently at my back, her eyes complex. There was jealousy, unwillingness, but more than that, a fear she herself couldn't quite explain. She realized that this sister before her eyes seemed to have become a complete stranger overnight, someone she didn't recognize at all. The three of them eventually left in disgrace. The hall returned to deathly silence. I walked to the window and pushed it open. A bright moon hung high in the night sky, its cold radiance spilling across the land. I don't know how much time passed before an aged voice came from behind me, "Miss Shen." I turned around, it was Li Dequan, the head eunuch. I didn't know when he'd come in, silent as a ghost. He held a tray in his hands with a bowl of steaming ginger soup on it, along with a brand new cloak. "This is a gift from His Majesty." Li Dequan set the items on the table, a trace of respectful smile on his face. "His Majesty says the night wind is strong, and young ladies have delicate constitutions. Drink a bowl of ginger soup to warm yourself, lest you catch a chill. See, did you all notice? This is what I mean by the devil's in the details. The Emperor, on the surface he is cold and ruthless, but actually, he is incredibly attentive. A bowl of ginger soup seems ordinary, but sent at a time like this, it is deeply meaningful. This is why I love writing this kind of layered mail. Lead, he is not some dumb sweet domineering CEO. He is an emperor who truly understands how to win people's hearts. Of course, I'll admit, when I wrote this part, even I got a little swoony, guilty as charged. My heart skipped a beat. What did the emperor mean by this? Was this appeasement, a test, or the calm before the storm? I couldn't see through it, couldn't guess it either. An emperor's heart is as deep as the sea. Li Dequan set down the items, bowed again, and withdrew silently. I stared at the bowl of steaming ginger soup on the table, motionless for a long time. This bowl of ginger soup might be good medicine, but it could also be poison that pierces through the intestines. That bowl of ginger soup, I ended up drinking it after all, downed it in one gulp. The warm liquid slid down my throat, dispelling the chill of the deep night and warming my heart that had long grown cold. I didn't know if this was a new gamble, but since Xiao Jingyan didn't directly condemn me at Jiayang Palace, it meant he still had at least a trace of interest in me. As long as there is interest, I have value to be used. As long as there is value, I have a chance to survive. Rather than staying here in fear, trying to guess the emperor's mind, I might as well leave everything to him. Life or death, let him decide. After finishing the ginger soup, I placed the empty bowl on the table and waited quietly, waiting for the next move of that chess player. I don't know how much time passed before the palace door was silently pushed open. Li Dequan's figure appeared at the entrance, bowing, and behind him was a tall upright figure in bright yellow. Xiao Jingyuan. He actually came in person. My heart tightened and I immediately stood up and knelt down. "This subject pays respects to your Majesty." He had changed out of his elaborate court robes and was only wearing a bright yellow everyday dragon robe, with less of the majesty of the supreme ruler and more of the oppressive presence of an ordinary man. He didn't tell me to rise, only walked slowly to stand before me. His gaze fell on the empty soup bowl, his eyes deep and inscrutable, revealing no emotion. "You drank it all." His voice was low and magnetic, sounding especially clear in the silent night. "Yes, thank you for your Majesty's grace." I kept my head lowered, not daring to meet his eyes. "Aren't you afraid I poisoned it?" he suddenly asked, his tone carrying a hint of amusement. My heart clenched violently, cold sweat instantly seeping down my back, but I knew I couldn't panic. Under heaven, all land belongs to the king. This subject's life already belongs to your Majesty. If your Majesty wishes to take it, why would you need such methods? To die under your Majesty's grace would be this subject's blessing. I positioned myself extremely humbly, every word and phrase flattering his supreme authority. He chuckled softly, the laugh revealing neither approval nor mockery. "That mouth of yours is far more formidable than your status." He walked to the table and sat down, pouring himself a cup of cold tea. "Lift your head." I obediently lifted my head, though my gaze remained lowered, not daring to look directly at the dragon countenance. "In Jiayang Hall, why did you choose me?" He asked this question again. I knew that this time, I couldn't brush it off with those high-sounding reasons. What he wanted to hear was the truth. Or rather, the truth he wanted to hear. I took a deep breath, as if mustering all the courage of my life. "Replying to your Majesty, it is because this subject was unwilling to accept it." Oh, he seemed to have taken an interest, his hand holding the teacup pausing in midair. Unwilling to accept what? Unwilling to accept that my sincere feelings were treated like trash and trampled on the ground, unwilling to accept that my 10 years of admiration only earned me public humiliation. Unwilling to accept that being born a concubine's daughter means being bullied by anyone. Without even the right to resist, my voice carried a tremor and tears welled up in my eyes at just the right moment. This wasn't an act, these were my real emotions, suppressed for over 10 years. So you set your sights on me. Xiao Jingyuan's tone suddenly turned cold. Using my imperial dignity, using the favor I granted while drunk to secure yourself a way out. What audacity you have. The overwhelming imperial pressure instantly enveloped the entire hall, pressing down on me until I could barely breathe. I kowtowed heavily to the ground. My forehead pressed against the cold floor. This subject wouldn't dare. This subject was desperate at the time, with only one thought in mind. Crown Prince is the heir apparent, the future son of heaven. His words are heavenly law. If he says this subject is lowly, then this subject is lowly. If he says this subject is only fit to carry shoes, then this subject will never have a chance to rise. In this world, there is only one person who can overturn Crown Prince's golden words. I lifted my head, looking at him through tear-filled eyes, my gaze full of admiration and reverence. That would be your majesty. I don't want to use your majesty, I just want to find a way to survive. I want to live like a person, not like a dog for everyone to mock. So I chose you, chose the only deity in this world who could grant me dignity. After saying this, I bowed down again, completely placing my fate in his hands. The great hall fell into a long silence once more. I could hear my own heartbeat, like beating drums, each one heavier than the last. After a long while, a long sigh came from above my head. Shen Tingyuan has raised a good daughter. I couldn't tell if this was praise or criticism. He stood up, walked to my side, and gently lifted my chin with the tip of his foot. I was forced to raise my head and meet his gaze. What kind of eyes were those, deep as an ancient well, as if they could suck a person's soul right in. Within them was a sharpness that saw through everything, a calm that controlled the whole situation, and a trace of complex emotions I couldn't understand. You are indeed very clever and very brave. You won your bet. Hearing these 3 words, my tense nerves suddenly relaxed, and I nearly collapsed to the ground. But his tone shifted. I never keep useless people by my side. Since you dared to place your bet on me, you must have the corresponding resolve. From now on, you are no longer Shen Weian, the concubine-born daughter of the Grand Tutor's manor. I bestow upon you a new identity. He released me, stood with his hands behind his back, his voice resuming the majesty of an emperor. I lack a female official to grind ink by my side. Starting tomorrow, you shall serve in the Imperial study. Without my permission, you are not to step beyond the palace gate. Female official, not a consort, not a talented lady, but a female official who serves with brush and ink. This outcome, once again, exceeded my expectations, but thinking it over carefully, this might be the best outcome. Becoming his woman, I would immediately become a thorn in the eyes of all the women in the harem, not even knowing how I'd die. But a female official, though of humble status, could often remain by the sovereign's side. This was an excellent position for observation, and also the most dangerous abyss. This subject receives the decree with gratitude. I suppressed the myriad thoughts in my heart and kowtowed respectfully. He said nothing more and turned to leave the Qingshan hall. His tall figure disappeared into the night, as if he had never appeared. Only the faint lingering scent of ambergris in the air proved that everything just now wasn't a dream. I slowly rose from the cold floor, walked to the window, and gazed at that cold, clear moon. I knew that from this night on, my life would be completely rewritten. I was no longer anyone's daughter, anyone's sister. I was only Emperor Xiao Jingyuan's imperial female official. The news that the emperor personally visited the Qingshan hall late at night and appointed a concubine, born daughter of the Shen family as an imperial attendant spread throughout the entire palace overnight, as if it had grown wings. Immediately after it spread to every corner outside the palace at an astonishing speed. The entire capital city was shaken by this. No one expected that the absurd farce of seeking marriage would end in such a bizarre way. Imperial attendant, this official position was not unheard of in this dynasty, but it was usually held by noble ladies from prestigious families with clean backgrounds and outstanding talents, and was mostly a nominal position to show favor. For someone like me, with the status of a criminal official's daughter, to be exceptionally promoted and directly placed beside the emperor was truly unprecedented. For a time, all kinds of speculation and rumors arose. Some said I must have used some seductive tricks to bewitch His Majesty's heart. Some said His Majesty did this to warn the Crown Prince and balance the power in court. Others said this was just His Majesty's whim, and once the novelty wore off, I would be knocked back to my original form, with an even worse fate than before. And at the center of these rumors, the Eastern Palace. Right now, the atmosphere was heavy with tension. Crack! A fine celadon teacup was violently smashed to the ground, shattering into pieces. Crown Prince Xiaoche's face was filled with ferocious rage, his eyes bloodshot, like an enraged cornered beast. Attendant, Imperial attendant. He repeated these words through gritted teeth, his chest heaving violently. What on earth does Father Emperor want to do? Where does this leave my face as Crown Prince? To him this was an utter humiliation. He had just belittled me as worthless at the celebration banquet, and Father Emperor immediately promoted me to his side right after. This was no different from slapping him hard across the face in front of all the civil and military officials. Shen Mingyue knelt to the side, her face pale as paper, her body trembling. She gently consoled him. Your Highness, please calm your anger. His Majesty's action. Perhaps is just to give the Grand Tutor's manor a way out after all. Father, he shut up. Xiaoqiao suddenly turned around, glaring at her with fierce eyes. A way out? Is he giving Shen Tingyuan a way out, or giving that good sister of yours a way up? Shen Mingyu. You better explain clearly to me whether all this was planned by your Shen family from the start. Did you father and daughter see you couldn't climb up my tree, so you turned around to hug Father Emperor's thigh instead? These heart-piercing words made Shen Mingyue tremble all over, tears instantly filling her eyes. Your Highness, how can you think of me this way? My devotion to you, heaven and earth can bear witness. That bitch Shen Wine did such shameless things. I too wish I could kill her with my own hands to vent your anger, Your Highness. She cried like pear blossoms in the rain, evoking pity in anyone who saw her. If it were any other day, Xiaoqiao would have already pulled her into his arms and comforted her with gentle words. But today, the rage and humiliation in his heart had already made him lose all patience. He grabbed Shen Mingyue's chin, forcing her to lift her head. Drop that fake act of yours, I am telling you. Don't think that just because you've secured the position of Crown Princess, you can rest easy. That bitch is right by Father Emperor's side now. If she whispers anything in Father Emperor's ear, forget about you, even the entire Shen family. I won't be able to protect Shen. Mingyue was frightened by the viciousness in his eyes, shaking her head with tears streaming down. She won't, Your Highness, my sister, she wouldn't dare. Wouldn't dare. Xiaoqiao let out a cold laugh, releasing his hand as if shaking off something filthy. She dared to publicly ask Father Emperor for marriage, what else wouldn't she dare? That woman's cunning and audacity far exceed yours. If you fight with her, sooner or later she'll devour you until not even bones remain. Having said that, he ignored Shen Mingyue, who had collapsed on the floor, pacing back and forth in the hall irritably. He absolutely cannot let that bitch succeed. He would never allow a woman he had discarded like trash to climb above his head. He stopped in his tracks, a flash of sinister malice in his eyes. Summono, a trusted eunuch, immediately emerged from the shadows. What are your Highness's orders? Go, keep a close eye on the Imperial study for me. Every move Shen Weiyan makes, every word she says, I want to know about it. Also, go investigate who she has been in contact with recently, and if there is anything unusual. I refuse to believe that she, a mere concubine-born daughter from a sheltered household, could have such heaven-reaching abilities. There must be someone behind her guiding her. Yes. The eunuch received the order and withdrew. Shen Mingyue looked at Xiaoqiao's gloomy profile, a bone-chilling coldness surging in her heart. She knew the Crown Prince was truly enraged and had murderous intent. She also hated Shen Weiyan. Hated her for stealing the glory that should have been hers, hated her for making her lose face in front of the Crown Prince, but she was even more afraid. She feared that if His Majesty found out about the Crown Prince's actions, it would bring catastrophic disaster, but she didn't dare to advise him. At this moment, Xiaoqiao was like an out-of-control beast. Anyone who tried to stop him would be torn to shreds. An even greater storm was quietly brewing, and I, at the center of the storm, knew nothing about it. Early the next morning, Li Dequan personally brought 2 young palace maids to Qingxin Hall. They brought me a brand new female official's outfit, a set of light cyan palace dress with a simple style but extremely fine fabric. Official Shen, please change your clothes. Li Dequan's attitude was even more respectful than yesterday. His Majesty is already waiting in the Imperial study. I nodded, and with the palace maids attending to me, I changed into new clothes and had my hair done in a simple bun. In the bronze mirror, a strange figure was reflected. The face was still that delicate face, but the eyes were no longer filled with the timidity and humility of the past. In their place was a calmness born from death and rebirth, and a trace of unfathomable resolution. The path from Qingxin Hall to the Imperial study was not particularly long, but I felt as if I had walked for a lifetime. The palace servants along the way, all cast curious, probing, contemptuous, or jealous glances at me. I kept my eyes straight ahead. My spine held perfectly straight. I knew that from the moment I stepped into the Imperial study, what I would face was a battlefield 10,000 times more treacherous than Jiayang Hall. There were no flashing blades here, yet danger lurked at every step. One wrong step, and there would be no redemption. The door to the Imperial study was heavy and imposing. Li Diquan pushed the door open for me and made a gesture of please. I took a deep breath and stepped inside. From this moment on, Shen Weian was dead. The one alive was the Imperial female official, Weian. Inside the Imperial study, sandalwood incense curled through the air. Xiao Jingyuan sat upright behind the massive rosewood desk, reviewing the mountain of memorials piled before him. He wore a black dragon robe, a jade crown on his head, his expression focused, his entire being radiating the imperial aura of one who held power over life and death. Hearing the sound, he didn't look up, only spoke indifferently. "You are here?" "Yes." I walked to the side of the desk and knelt down in salute. "This servant Weian pays respects to your majesty." From the moment I stepped in here, I referred to myself as a servant, voluntarily placing my status at the lowest. He seemed satisfied with how I addressed myself, the corner of his mouth lifting imperceptibly. "Are you clear on my rules?" "Yes, Chief Steward Li has already explained them." He acknowledged and said nothing more. Continuing to handle state affairs, in the Imperial study only the rustling sound of the brush tip across paper remained. I stood in place, hands hanging at my sides, eyes on nose on heart like a lifeless sculpture. I knew this was the first test for me, testing my patience. 1 hour passed, 2 hours passed. From early morning to noon he never spoke another word to me, didn't even glance at me again. My legs had long since gone numb and sore from standing, my back stiff from tension, but I maintained my initial posture the entire time, motionless. Finally, he put down the vermilion brush in his hand and rubbed his brow. "Come here, grind the ink." Yes, I lifted my skirt and walked soundlessly to the other side of the desk. There sat a fine Duan inkstone, with an inkstick and clear water beside it. I rolled up my sleeves, picked up the water pot, and carefully dripped a few drops of clear water into the inkstone. Then I picked up the inkstick, held it perpendicular to the inkstone surface, and began grinding with even pressure and steady speed. My movements were stable and quiet. This was one of the few skills I could actually show off. Though mother was a concubine, she came from a scholarly family, and taught me reading, writing, ink grinding and painting since childhood. She always said that a woman's lack of talent is her virtue, but learning more things is always good. You never know when they might come in handy. Who knew her words would come true? Xiao Jingyuan didn't look at me, his gaze still resting on the memorial. But he seemed to be listening with his ears, judging with his senses. In the air, a refined ink fragrance gradually spread. "What do you think about the Western Border War?" He suddenly spoke, asking a question I never expected. My hand paused, the ink stick nearly slipping. The Western Border War. That was the battlefield where Crown Prince Xiao Che earned merit and glory, a matter of national importance. He was actually asking me, a newly appointed female official. I immediately understood. This wasn't just a question, this was a second test, testing my intelligence, or rather, testing whether I had the awareness to be a chess piece. I couldn't say I didn't know, that would make me seem stupid and useless. I also couldn't talk big, that would make me seem arrogant and presumptuous, meddling in state affairs. I lowered my eyes and continued with the task at hand, my voice respectful and humble. "In response to your majesty, this servant is but a mere woman who knows nothing of military strategy. This servant only knows that before troops move, provisions must go first. War is fought not only with military strength, but also with the silver in the national treasury and the grain in the granaries. The western border is bitterly cold and the journey distant. The transport of provisions is of utmost importance. Should anything go wrong with the provisions, even 1,000,000 mighty soldiers at the front would have no choice but to be defeated without a fight." I didn't discuss any strategic or tactical matters, only spoke of the most obvious yet most fundamental principles. These principles were what I had learned in the past at the Grand Tutor's residence, watching the stewards coordinate the procurement in the mansion. Even a grand estate must carefully budget for firewood, rice, oil and salt. How much more so for a nation supporting a great war involving hundreds of thousands of people. After I finished speaking, I said no more and quietly awaited his judgment. The Imperial study fell silent once again. This silence was even more oppressive than before. I could even feel his sharp gaze fall upon me, as if trying to see through me completely inside and out. After a long while he finally spoke slowly. "Is this women's perspective all that Shen Tingyuan taught you?" His tone revealed neither pleasure nor anger. My heart tightened and I immediately knelt down. "This servant is dull-witted, please forgive me, your majesty." "Humph," he let out a light snort from his nose. "Get up, if I tell you to speak then speak. I pardon you from any offense." "Yes." I stood up trembling with fear, returned to my original position, and continued grinding. But my mind was racing rapidly. What did he mean by that statement just now? Was he displeased that my words were too shallow, or was he testing whether I still had loyalty toward the Grand Tutor's household? "Take a look at the grain and provisions transport plan submitted by the Ministry of Revenue." He pushed a memorial to the throne in front of me. My heartbeat skipped a beat. He is letting me look at a memorial. This was already a blatant breach of protocol, but I didn't dare refuse. I carefully picked up that memorial and opened it. It was densely written with the quantities, routes, and officials in charge of requisitioning grain and provisions from various regions. It appeared flawless, but I keenly discovered a problem. All the grain and provisions, final gathering point was at a place called Yanmen Pass. Then the Yanmen Pass garrison commander would uniformly escort them to the front lines. And I happened to know this Yanmen Pass garrison commander. He was a distant nephew of the crown prince's maternal family, Empress Wang. A massive conspiracy loomed faintly in my mind. I felt a chill run down my spine. What was Xiao Jingyuan doing? Showing me such a memorial that might involve the heir apparent forming factions for personal gain. Was this trust, or yet another even more dangerous test? If I speak up about the problem, I'll directly offend the crown prince and the empress's faction. If I pretend not to understand, I'll betray his current trust in me and appear incompetent. This is simply a dead-end situation. My hand gripping the memorial turned white at the knuckles from the force. Cold sweat slowly trickled down from my temples. My brain was racing at full speed. Every thought felt like dancing on the edge of a blade. This memorial was a hot potato, and even more so, a cup of deadly poison. To take it, or not to take it, to speak or not to speak, one wrong step, and I'd be shattered to pieces. Xiao Jingyuan didn't rush me, he just watched me quietly. Those unfathomably deep eyes seeming to appreciate the final performance of prey struggling before death. He enjoyed this feeling of toying with everything in the palm of his hand. Time seemed to stretch infinitely at this moment. I could clearly hear the frantic beating of my heart inside my chest. I slowly deeply drew in a breath. When I raised my head again, the panic on my face had faded, leaving only respectful calm. I gently placed the memorial back on the desk, then stepped back and knelt on the ground once more. This action made Xiao Jingyuan's eyebrow arch slightly. Your Majesty. My voice wasn't loud, but exceptionally clear. This servant dares to ask Your Majesty, what is the terrain like at Yanmen Pass? I didn't answer his question directly, but instead asked a seemingly unrelated question. A hint of interest flashed in Xiao Jingyuan's eyes. Yanmen Pass, the foremost of the 9 strategic passes under heaven. With treacherous terrain, easy to defend and hard to attack, one man guards the pass, 10,000 cannot break through. His voice carried a trace of imperial pride. I kowtowed again. Your Majesty is wise. This servant was just thinking, since Yanmen Pass is so strategically important, it must also be a thorn in the side and flesh of the Western barbarians. Would they not spare any cost to seize this place? Xiao Jingyuan said nothing, only picked up his teacup and took a light sip. He was waiting for me to continue. I steadied my mind and continued speaking. This servant doesn't understand military campaigns, just thinking from the most simple-minded angle. The plan from the Ministry of Revenue officials gathers all provisions and supplies at Yanmen Pass alone, then redistributes from there. This is naturally for unified coordination and convenient management, the most secure and most efficient method. I first affirmed the reasonableness of this memorial without directly raising any doubts, but I shifted my tone, adding just the right amount of concern to my voice. This servant can't help but feel this is somewhat like putting all the eggs in one basket. Yanmen Pass may be impregnable, but what if? What if the western border barbarians become desperate and gather all their elite forces, attacking Yanmen Pass recklessly without regard for casualties? Or perhaps, they send out surprise troops, circle around to the rear, and burn our grain supplies. Or again, if this year the northern lands have heavy snow, and a sudden blizzard blocks the roads, preventing timely transport of grain supplies. What this servant has said are all just a woman's views, perhaps unfounded worries. But the lives of hundreds of thousands of soldiers at the front all depend on this single supply line. Once the grain supplies are lost, the consequences would be unthinkable. This servant thinks, could we perhaps prepare one more route, for example outside Yanmen Pass, establish a secondary grain supply transfer station, supporting each other, serving as backups for one another. This way, even if the main route has problems, the backup route can immediately take over, so the frontline soldiers won't fall into a desperate situation. Only this way can it be a foolproof strategy. I finished speaking, wrapping all my views under the guise of a woman's views and unfounded worries. I didn't mention anyone's name, didn't question that Wang clan general's loyalty. I only raised what seemed like a more prudent suggestion from a risk perspective. This way, I pointed out the biggest hidden danger in the memorial, while perfectly avoiding all political sharp edges. What I talked about was grain supplies. But to Xiao Jingyuan's ears, what he heard was military power, was the hearts of men. Inside the Imperial study, a deathly silence. The smoke of sandalwood incense rose in wisps, blurring Xiao Jingyuan's expression. I knelt on the ground, my forehead pressed against the cold golden bricks waiting for the final judgment. This time, his silence lasted even longer, so long that I almost thought my heart would stop beating. Finally, I heard an extremely soft laugh. Haha, he set the teacup down heavily on the table, making a crisp sound. Shen Tingyuan must be blind to have a daughter like you yet only treat you as a stepping stone. Get up. His voice revealed neither joy nor anger, but I knew I had bet correctly. From this deadly game, I had carved out a path to survival for myself. Thank you, Your Majesty. I shakily stood up, and because I had knelt for too long, my legs went numb and I nearly fell. From today on, you will stay in the side hall of the Imperial study. No need to return to Qingshan Hall anymore. He instructed indifferently, as if merely discussing some trivial matter, but inside my heart was in turmoil. Stay in the side hall of the Imperial study. This meant I would be under his control 24 hours a day. This also meant I had completely become his most personal blade. Was this favor, or an even tighter cage? Also, he picked up the memorial from the Ministry of Revenue and drew a circle on it with a vermilion brush. Send this memorial back to the Ministry of Revenue, and have them draft a new plan according to what you said. Once it is drafted, present it to you first. If you think it is appropriate, then send it to my desk. Boom. In my mind it was as if thunder had exploded. Not only did he adopt my suggestion, he even handed over the authority to review this plan to me. I, a female official who had just taken office with no foundation whatsoever, actually possessed the power to reject memorials from the 6 ministries. Once this decree spreads, what kind of huge uproar will it cause throughout the entire court and inner palace? He is lifting me up high, lifting me to a position where all eyes are on me, and all arrows pierce my heart. He wants me to become the most conspicuous target for the Crown Prince and Empress's faction. What a ruthless method. What? He raised his eyes, his gaze sharp as lightning. Don't dare. I lowered my head, hiding all my emotions. This servant obeys the decree. My life from this moment on has no way back. A sovereign's word is never spoken in jest. Xiao Jingyuan's decree spread faster than the wind. Before I could even recover from my shock, Li Dequan had already personally brought people to move all my belongings from Qingshan Hall to the side hall of the Imperial study. Calling it all my belongings, it was actually just a small bundle containing a few changes of clothes. The side hall of the Imperial study was separated from the main hall by only a wall. The furnishings here are 100 times more luxurious than the Qingshan Hall. Rosewood tables and chairs, brocade bedding, famous calligraphy and paintings hanging on the walls, rare antiques displayed on the curio shelves. Any single item is far more precious than me, a concubine, born daughter of the Grand Tutor's household. Li Dequan's attitude toward me became increasingly respectful, even carrying a hint of barely perceptible fear. He personally made up the bed for me, and ordered young eunuchs to bring hot water and exquisite meals. Lady Shen, please feel at ease living here from now on. Whatever you need, just order this servant around. His Majesty has said that you may come and go in the Imperial study without announcement, the same as this servant. The weight of these words was as heavy as 1,000 jun. No need for announcement meant I could enter and exit the core area where the Emperor handled state affairs at any time. What an astonishing level of trust and authorization. This was I nodded, my voice somewhat hoarse. Thank you for your trouble, Chief Steward Li. Li Dequan smiled obsequiously and bowed as he withdrew. In the vast side hall only I remained. I walked to the window and looked at the square patch of sky outside. I knew that from the moment I moved in here, I had become a canary kept in a golden cage, and also a blade that had already been unsheathed. Sure enough, that very afternoon, the Minister of Revenue personally carried a redrafted memorial and requested an audience outside the Imperial study. According to protocol, he should be requesting an audience with the Emperor, but, when he submitted his request card, he said he was seeking an audience with female official Shen. Li Dequan presented the memorial, his face wearing an expression of watching a good show. Female official Shen, Minister Wang from the Ministry of Revenue is waiting outside. I took the memorial that still carried residual warmth. My heart felt ice cold. Xiao Jingyuan was forcing my hand. He not only wanted me to become a target but also wanted me to personally offend all these powerful nobles at court. Wang Ru, Minister of Revenue, was the Empress's elder brother, the current imperial uncle, and the Crown Prince's most solid backing. A nobody like me was supposed to review his memorial. This was no different from slapping his face in public. I opened the memorial. The new proposal was already written. It completely followed my morning suggestions, adding a backup grain and fodder base, called Cloud City, and formulated a detailed deployment plan. On the surface, it was flawless. They had obviously put in effort and didn't dare show the slightest negligence. I carefully read it 3 times. Then, I picked up the vermilion brush. Li Dequan watched from the side, his eyes going wide. He hadn't expected that I would actually dare to review it. At the end of the memorial, I wrote the character approved. Then, I added a line of small characters after it. The selection of Cloud City's garrison commander is of great importance. Please let His Majesty make the sacred decision. After writing, I handed the memorial back to Li Dequan. I trouble you, Chief Steward, to present this memorial to His Majesty. Li Dequan took the memorial, and upon seeing the line I had added, a flash of surprise crossed his eyes, which then turned to understanding. He said nothing and bowed as he withdrew. This stroke of mine seems redundant, but is actually crucial. I can review the grain and supplies proposal. But personnel appointments and dismissals are the Emperor's power, which I absolutely cannot touch, especially in such a sensitive position. I kicked this hot potato right back to Xiao Jingyuan, completely unchanged. This both demonstrates my proper role and sends him a message. I'll only be the blade, not the one wielding it. Xiao Jingyuan quickly saw my response. He said nothing, just picked up his brush and circled the name Wang Ru, then wrote another name, Marquis of Dingbei, Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan was a veteran general in the army, utterly loyal, but straightforward and inflexible. Never getting along with the Crown Prince's faction, having him guard Yunzhong City was like hammering a nail into the Crown Prince's supply route. Xiao Jingyuan's intentions were crystal clear. When these two edicts were issued from the palace one after another, the entire court completely exploded. Everyone was caught completely off guard by the Emperor's sudden move. No one expected that a farce at the celebration banquet would evolve into such a thrilling power struggle. And the name Shen Weian, also for the first time burst into the view of all court officials with thunderous force. They began frantically investigating my origins, my background, everything about me, a lowly concubine, born daughter, suddenly rising to power, actually able to influence court decisions. To everyone, this was an extremely dangerous signal. Within the Eastern Palace, the atmosphere was even more gloomy and bleak. Useless, a bunch of useless fools. Xiao Che swept everything on the desk onto the floor. His eyes were bloodshot, looking like a madman. A woman I didn't want. She has actually climbed on top of me to shit and piss. What the hell is Wang Rui doing? Are all those people at the Ministry of Revenue dead? To let a bitch ride on our necks? Shen Mingyue knelt on the ground, too frightened to say a word. She had never seen Xiao Chao lose his composure like this. Wang Rui, the imperial uncle standing to the side, also had an ashen face. He bowed and said, "Your Highness, please calm your anger. I also didn't expect His Majesty would be so frivolous. Letting a female official review court memorials is simply the greatest joke in the world. I've already contacted the censorate. At tomorrow's morning court, dozens of censors will jointly submit a memorial to impeach that witch for interfering in politics." Witch? Xiao Che let out a cold laugh, looking at him with sinister eyes. "Uncle, do you still think this is just about a woman? If she is a witch, then what is Father Emperor who issued the decree?" Wang Rui's whole body trembled, immediately breaking out in cold sweat. "I misspoke." Xiao Che took a deep breath, forcing himself to calm down. He knew things had already spiraled beyond his control. This is no longer just Shen Weian's problem alone. This is Father Emperor, issuing a warning to him, to their Wang family. Impeachment won't work. Xiao Che's voice turned ice cold. Since Father Emperor dares to do this, he won't fear those censors' spittle. A head-on confrontation will only make us more passive. He paced, a dangerous gleam flickering in his eyes. Since we can't move against her in court, then we can only use other methods. He turned his head to look at Shen Mingyue. That gaze made Shen Mingyue feel like she'd fallen into an icy abyss. "Mingyue," his voice suddenly became gentle. "Haven't you always missed your sister? Tomorrow, under the pretext of visiting, go into the palace to see her. On my behalf, give her a grand gift." The next day, at the break of dawn, I was woken by a palace maid and began washing up. As an imperial attendant, I had to rise earlier than the emperor to prepare his writing materials and arrange everything in the study. When I was properly dressed and entered the main hall, Xiao Jingyuan was already sitting there having breakfast. Before him were over a dozen exquisite dishes, yet he was only leisurely sipping a bowl of plain congee. Seeing me enter, he lifted his eyes slightly. "Come here, eat with me." I froze for a moment, then quickly knelt down. This servant wouldn't dare. There must be distinction between sovereign and subject. "I am telling you to sit, so sit." His tone brooked no argument. I didn't dare refuse again and could only sit down, trembling at the position diagonally across from him. A huge dining table. With only the two of us seated, the atmosphere was so oppressive, it was suffocating. Li Dequan personally served me a bowl of porridge and arranged some side dishes. I kept my head down, eating in small bites, tasting nothing. "The Crown Prince's consort has requested an audience, saying she wants to enter the palace to visit you," Xiao Jingyuan said indifferently while drinking his porridge. My hand suddenly trembled, the spoon nearly dropping into the bowl. "Shen Mingyue wants to see me." At this critical moment, a weasel paying New Year's respects to a chicken up to no good. I immediately understood this was Crown Prince Xiao's probe, or rather, a warning, Your Majesty. I raised my head, wanting to say something. I've approved it. Xiao Jingyuan cut me off. Meet in your side hall. You sisters haven't seen each other in a long time, you should catch up properly. There was no expression on his face, making it impossible to tell what he was thinking. My heart, however, sank bit by bit. He is testing me, testing how I handle pressure from the Eastern Palace, also telling me that he can push me out at any time, leaving me to face the storm alone. The heart of a sovereign is truly unfathomable. Yes, this servant obeys your decree. I suppressed the unease in my heart and responded respectfully. After finishing breakfast, Xiao Jingyuan began handling state affairs. I served ink and brush by his side as usual, but my heart could never calm down. I didn't know what Shen Mingyue would bring: humiliation, threats, or something even more terrifying. In the afternoon, Shen Mingyue arrived. She wore luxurious crown prince consort formal attire, adorned with pearls and jade, exquisite makeup, followed by a large group of palace maids and eunuchs in a grand procession. Compared to her, my simple female official's clothing looked utterly shabby. Li Diquan led her to the side hall, then tactfully withdrew with all the servants and closed the hall doors. Inside the side hall, only we two sisters remained. Our eyes met, speechless for a moment. Little sister. It was Shen Mingyue who spoke first. On her face was a gentle, kind smile I had never seen before. Haven't seen you in days. Little sister has gotten much thinner. In this palace, are you getting used to it? She walked up to me and affectionately took my hand, as if we were still those intimately close sisters from the past. If it were before, I might have been deceived by this facade, but now I only felt utterly disgusted. I calmly withdrew my hand, stepped back, and curtsied to her. Crown Princess, may you be well. This servant is now merely a palace lady, in waiting, and cannot accept your highness calling me sister. I deliberately distanced us, making clear my status and position. The smile on Shen Mingyue's face froze for a moment, a flash of malice crossed her eyes, but was quickly concealed. Sister, what are you saying? No matter what your status is, you'll always be my sister. Shen Mingyue's sister, a daughter of the Grand Tutor's household. As she spoke, she took an exquisite food box from the palace maid behind her. This is almond tofu I made for you with my own hands. You've always loved eating this since you were little. Try it and see if it still tastes the same as before. She opened the food box, and a sweet fragrance wafted over. That bowl of almond tofu was white as jade, with a few bright red goji berries sprinkled on top, looking extremely tempting. I looked at that bowl of almond tofu, my gaze growing colder and colder. I did like eating almond tofu, but in the entire Grand Tutor's household only one person knew that I had a deadly allergy to almonds. Just one small bite would cause me to break out in rashes all over, have difficulty breathing, and in severe cases even suffocate to death. And the person who knew this secret was my birth mother. When I was very young, she warned me over and over again to never touch anything related to almonds. Shen Mingyue. How could she know? Unless, a terrifying thought flashed through my mind. I jerked my head up and stared at her intently. Sister, how did you know I like eating this? My voice trembled slightly from shock. The smile on Shen Mingyue's face grew even brighter. She leaned close to my ear and said softly, in a voice only the two of us could hear, Your aunt told me. Oh, no, I should say, your birth mother, she said. This is your favorite food, and also, the best thing to send you on your way. Boom. My world completely collapsed in that moment. I staggered back 2 steps, unable to believe my ears. Mother. My birth mother wants to kill me. No, impossible. Shen Mingyue must be lying to me. You are lying, I shouted sternly, my emotions somewhat out of control. Shen Mingyue looked at my devastated appearance and laughed so hard she was shaking. I am lying. Little sister, you are really too naive. Why do you think your mother sent you to the Grand Tutor's residence? Why do you think she hasn't cared about you all these years? Because from the moment you were born, you've been a chess piece she laid down to pave the way for me. Your existence is to set me off, to sacrifice yourself when I need it, to fulfill me. Now, you, this chess piece, have become disobedient, and even dare to dream of climbing above your master. Tell me, shouldn't she personally end you with her own hands? Every word from Shen Mingyue was like a poisoned blade, stabbing viciously into my heart. All the blood in my body seemed to freeze in an instant. No wonder mother taught me music, chess, calligraphy, and painting since childhood, but never let me compete for attention. No wonder she always said that sister was the hope of the Shen family, and I only needed to stay in my place. No wonder, in Jiayang Hall, father and my legitimate mother only blamed me, without a shred of protection. So it turns out, from beginning to end, I was nothing but a joke, a pathetic joke, used as a tool and sacrifice by my own birth mother. Why? My voice was hoarse, tears of blood flowing from my eyes. Why? Shen Mingyu admired my agonized expression, the smugness on her face, no longer concealable. There is no why. Because I am the legitimate daughter, the future crown prince's consort, the future empress, and you are just a lowly concubine-born daughter, a thing that can be discarded at any time. Now, His Highness gives you one last chance. She picked up that bowl of almond cream and approached me step by step. Drink it. His Highness will, for the sake of past affection, announce to the world that you died of sudden illness, leaving you some dignity. Your death can even earn Father His Majesty's sympathy, and bring the Shen family temporary peace. This is the most valuable thing you can do in your lifetime. Her voice, like a devil's whisper, was filled with malicious temptation. I looked at the deadly dessert in her hand, a towering hatred surging in my heart. They humiliated me, used me, and now, they want to take my life. Why, just because I am a concubine's daughter? A power I'd never felt before suddenly erupted from the depths of my heart. I didn't retreat anymore. Instead, I walked toward her. Under Shen Mingyue's astonished gaze, I snatched the porcelain bowl from her hand. Then, under her horrified stare, I raised that bowl of almond cream high, and then viciously smashed it on my own head. Crash, a crisp sound. The porcelain bowl shattered on impact. The white almond cream, mixed with fresh blood flowing from my temple, streamed down my face. Utterly wretched, yet also shockingly horrifying. Shen Mingyue was so frightened by this sudden scene that she screamed, and I, amidst her screams, used every ounce of strength in my body to roar toward the outside of the hall, summoning help. The crown prince's consort is trying to kill someone. My roar, shrill and desperate, pierced through the heavy palace doors. Almost in an instant, the palace doors were violently thrown open from outside. Li Dequan rushed in with a team of nervous-looking guards. When they saw the scene inside the hall, everyone gasped in shock. Crown Prince's consort Shen Mingyue sat collapsed on the ground, her face drained of all color, trembling uncontrollably. As for me, my face was covered in a mixture of blood and milky white liquid, with a gruesome wound on my temple, blood still gushing out continuously. At my feet were shattered porcelain pieces and a mess all over the floor. The entire scene was shocking to behold, filled with an indescribable eeriness and violence. What happened here? Li Dequan's voice had changed pitch. Protect His Highness, guard His Highness. The guards behind him immediately drew their swords, surrounding Shen Mingyue and me completely. As if I had exhausted my last bit of strength, my body went limp and I collapsed in Li Dequan's direction. Manager Li, save me. The almond cream was poisoned. The crown prince's consort tried to kill me. My voice was barely a whisper, each word filled with fear and grievance. After speaking, my head lolled to the side and I passed out. In the last moment before my consciousness faded, I saw Shen Mingyue's eyes widen in terror, shaking her head frantically. No, it wasn't me. She hit herself. She has gone mad. Her defense, under these circumstances, seemed so pale and powerless. Who would believe that a weak woman would use such a tragic method to frame the current crown princess? What happened next, I perceived through a chaotic cacophony of noise. Summonon carefully lifted me up. I could smell the herbal medicine scent coming from the Imperial physician. And that familiar dragon ambergris fragrance carrying supreme authority. Xiao Jingyuan had arrived. I knew the climax of this act was just beginning. When I woke up again, I was already lying on the soft bed in the side hall. The wound on my forehead had been treated, sending waves of cool stinging pain. And unfamiliar old Imperial physician was taking my pulse, his brows tightly furrowed. And in the center of the room, Xiao Jingyuan sat upright in a grand armchair, his face dark as water. His gaze fell on me, showing neither joy nor anger, yet carrying a chilling scrutiny. Li Dequan stood behind him, not daring to breathe loudly. Shen Mingyue knelt in the center of the hall, her makeup ruined by tears, her hair disheveled. Where was even half the dignity of a crown princess? Your Majesty, you must uphold justice for this consort. It was her, it was Shen Huiyan, who went crazy. She smashed the bowl on her own head. She is framing this consort. She is jealous that this consort could marry the crown prince. She wanted to ruin this consort from the very beginning, she cried out hoarsely, trying to defend herself. But Xiao Jingyuan didn't even bother to glance at her. His gaze remained locked on me the entire time. I struggled to get up and bow, but he stopped me with just a look. Just lie down. His voice was very calm. Imperial physician, how is she? The old Imperial physician quickly stood up to respond. Your Majesty, Lady Shen's forehead wound is only superficial, nothing serious. However, he paused, his expression becoming extremely grave. However, Lady Shen seems to have suffered a tremendous shock. Her mind is agitated, and her qi and blood are flowing in reverse. Moreover, this humble subject just took the lady's pulse and discovered that her constitution is extremely unique. She has an innate and extremely strong adverse reaction to things like peach kernels and apricot kernels. If consumed by mistake, at best she'll break out in red rashes, all over and have difficulty breathing. At worst it will trigger laryngeal edema and death by suffocation. This is a congenital condition, absolutely not something that can be faked. The old imperial physician's words struck like a heavy hammer, pounding hard on Shen Mingyue's heart. Her crying stopped abruptly, all color draining from her face. A cold arc curved at the corner of Xiao Jingyuan's lips. He finally turned his gaze toward Shen Mingyue. Crown Prince Consort. You just said you personally made her favorite almond cream for her. Shen Mingyue trembled all over, her lips quivering, unable to utter a single word. She said it herself. She said it in front of Li Dequan and all the servants to show the deep sisterly bond. Now, all of this has become the most damning evidence. Summoning. Xiao Jingyuan's voice was cold as ice. Take the broken porcelain and filth on the ground for examination. Yes. Li Dequan immediately accepted the order, personally holding a tray and carefully collecting those pieces of evidence, sending them to the Imperial Medical Department. The time waiting for the results. Every minute and every second was torment. Shen Mingyue collapsed on the ground, her face ashen. She knew she could no longer defend herself. I lay on the bed, eyes closed, playing the part of a pitiful person frightened out of her wits. In my heart, however, was an icy calm. I knew I had won. From the moment Shen Mingyue brought out that bowl of almond cream she had lost. Because she would never understand how desperately a person who crawled out of hell wants to live. To survive, I would do anything. Soon Li Dequan returned, followed by a young imperial physician. The physician knelt on the ground, his voice trembling. Reporting to your majesty, the Imperial Medical Department has verified that bowl of dessert indeed contains a large amount of almond ingredients. It is a deadly substance for Lady Shen's constitution. The truth was revealed, the evidence was irrefutable. Good, very good. Xiao Jingyuan slowly stood up and walked step by step toward Shen Mingyue. He looked down at her from above, his eyes devoid of anger, containing only a bone, chilling indifference as if looking at a dead object. Plotting to harm an imperial lady-in-waiting is tantamount to plotting against me. Crown Princess, what audacity you have. Shen Mingyue was scared out of her wits, kowtowing desperately. Your Majesty, spare my life. Your Majesty, spare my life. This consort knows her mistake. This consort will never dare again. It was the Crown Prince. It was the Crown Prince who made this consort. In her desperation, she actually tried to drag Xiao Qiao down with her. Silence. Xiao Jingyuan's furious shout cut off her words. Do you think that by implicating the Crown Prince, I would spare you for the sake of the imperial family's reputation? You underestimate me too much. He turned around, his voice regaining the majesty and coldness of an emperor. Convey my decree. Crown Princess Shen, of improper conduct and vicious heart, is to be confined to Yuchu Palace, in the Eastern Palace, forbidden to leave without imperial edict. Her authority over the 6 palaces of the Eastern Palace is revoked. She shall copy the women's precepts 100 times daily and reflect thoroughly. As for the Grand Tutor's manner, he paused, his gaze sweeping toward me, laden with meaning. For failing to properly educate their daughter, their salary is forfeit for 1 year, as a warning to others. This punishment, while seemingly severe, actually left room for leniency. He didn't strip Shen Mingyue of her position as Crown Prince's consort, preserving the Crown Prince's dignity, but he took away her authority, cut off her contact with the outside world, and turned her into a living corpse. What is more, he used this to severely warn the Grand Tutor's household and the forces behind it. This was a perfect display of imperial power tactics. When Shen Mingyue heard this decree, her eyes rolled back and she completely passed out. Guards immediately stepped forward and dragged her out like a dead dog. Inside the great hall, silence finally returned. Xiao Jingyuan walked back to the bedside and looked at me. That act was pretty good, he suddenly spoke, saying something that sent chills through my entire body. My heart tightened and I struggled to get out of bed again. Your Majesty, this servant, lie down. He reached out and pressed down on my shoulder. His fingertips were ice cold, but his grip was strong. I don't care whether you are really stupid or just pretending. I only look at results. From today on, you are a nail I've driven into the top of the Eastern Palace. The more they want to pull you out, the more firmly I'll make you stand. Rest up and heal. I still have many things that need you to do. With that, he withdrew his hand, turned around, and left the side hall. I lay on the bed, watching his tall figure disappear at the doorway, unable to snap back to reality for a long time. The wound on my forehead was still throbbing with dull pain. I knew this scar would remain on me forever. It will constantly remind me of today's danger, today's determination, and that emperor's ruthlessness. Carved deep into his bones, the Crown Prince's consort in the side hall of the imperial study, attempted to poison the imperial lady-in-waiting Shen Wuyan, but was instead struck by Shen Wuyan, who smashed her head against a bowl, blood splattering on the spot. His Majesty flew into a thunderous rage, immediately confining the Crown Prince's consort and stripping her of authority over the 6 palaces. This news, like a magnitude 12 earthquake, spread to every corner of the Forbidden City. Within just half a day, everyone who heard this news had the same first reaction: disbelief. A concubine-born daughter who had just entered the palace with no foundation whatsoever had actually brought down the all-powerful Crown Prince's consort. This was simply the most incredible and bizarre incident since the founding of this dynasty. Immediately after, all kinds of rumors and gossip began to spread like wildfire. Some said that Shen Weian was actually His Majesty's illegitimate daughter lost for many years and had come to acknowledge her ancestry and return to the clan. Some said Shen Weian possessed strange arts and had bewitched His Majesty, which was why His Majesty obeyed her every word. Even more people were convinced that I was a complete and utter seductress, using fox-like charms to bewitch the ruler's heart and bring chaos to the court. For a time, the name Shen Weian became the most sought after yet most notorious existence in the entire capital city, and the other center of this storm, the Eastern Palace, had long been shrouded in gloom and filled with nervous tension. Xiao Che rushed into Yuxiu Palace the moment he got the news. What he saw was Shen Mingyue being pinned to the ground by 2 burly nannies, struggling and crying desperately like a madwoman. Your Highness, save me, I've been wronged. It is that bitch Shen Weian, who framed me. Seeing Xiao Che, Shen Mingyue grabbed onto him like a last lifeline, but Xiao Che's expression was even colder than the freezing wind outside the palace. Without a word, he stepped forward and viciously slapped Shen Mingyue across the face. Smack! The crisp sound made the entire palace fall silent. Shen Mingyue's mouth bled from the blow as she stared at him in disbelief. Your Highness, you hit me, hit you, in Xiao Che's eyes was undisguised rage and disappointment. I wish I could kill you. You useless fool who ruins everything. Who told you to provoke her? Who told you to use such stupid methods against her? Do you have any idea how passive my position is now because of your stupidity? Father Emperor has already issued an edict confining me to the Eastern Palace to reflect on my actions, the military achievements from the Western border, the praise from court officials, everything I've painstakingly built, all destroyed in an instant by you stupid woman. He pointed at Shen Mingyue's nose and cursed her out, venting all the rage and frustration onto her. Shen Mingyue was completely stunned. She never expected that what she got in return wasn't comfort and protection, but her husband's merciless contempt and scolding. Her heart instantly turned to ashes, and just as the Eastern Palace was in complete chaos, the side hall of the Imperial study where I was staying remained peaceful and tranquil. Xiao Jingyuan sent the best Imperial physician from the palace to treat me 3 times a day. All kinds of precious medicinal herbs and nourishing soups flowed endlessly into my room like water. Li Dequan took care of me with meticulous attention, showing more concern than he would for his own father. Everyone understood clearly. The current Shen Weian was the person closest to His Majesty's heart, someone who absolutely could not be offended. My injury wasn't actually that serious. After 3 days it had already scabbed over, but I still followed the Imperial physician's instructions, resting peacefully and staying indoors. I knew that the more turbulent things were outside, the calmer I needed to be here. A week later my injury had basically healed, leaving only a faint red scar at the corner of my forehead. That evening, after handling state affairs, Xiao Jingyuan entered my room for the first time. He dismissed all the servants, leaving only the 2 of us in the room. He walked up to me and carefully examined the scar on my forehead. Does it still hurt? His voice carried a rare hint of gentleness. I shook my head and said in a low voice, "Thank you for your Majesty's concern, it doesn't hurt anymore. It left a scar. I am afraid it will be hard to marry in the future." He suddenly said this. My heart stirred and I knelt down on the ground. This servant's life was saved by your Majesty. This servant is willing to remain by your Majesty's side for life, to share your Majesty's worries and solve problems, and dares not hope for anything else. This was my declaration of loyalty, and also my submission. Xiao Jingyuan seemed very satisfied with my answer. He reached out and helped me up. Get up. Your loyalty, I have received it. Since the injury has healed, don't lie down anymore. He pulled me along and walked to the desk in the outer room. On the desk, besides the writing brush, ink, paper and inkstone, there was one more thing, a heavy object wrapped in bright yellow brocade. He unwrapped the brocade, revealing a seal carved from fine Hetian jade inside. On top of the seal, a lifelike chai dragon coiled around it. This is my deputy seal. His voice carried an unquestionable authority. Starting today, I am giving you a new assignment. The memorials submitted daily by various ministries and departments, you will review them first, categorize them, and present the important ones to me. As for those sending greetings, singing praises or about trivial matters, use this deputy seal to approve them all for me and send them back. I don't want to waste my energy on these trivial matters anymore. Boom. My brain was once again blown into complete blankness by his words. The Vice Seal, although this seal is not as supreme as the Imperial Jade Seal, what it represents is the monarch's will, an extension of imperial power. Possessing it is equivalent to having partial authority to review memorials throughout history. Those who could wield this seal were without exception the princes and ministers most trusted by the emperor, and now, he actually placed it in the hands of me, a female official, who had only entered the palace for half a month. This was no longer just favor, this was simply shocking beyond belief. I was so frightened my legs went weak, and I wanted to kneel down again. Your Majesty, this absolutely cannot be. This servant is shallow in talent and learning, unworthy of such position, and cannot bear such a heavy responsibility. If word of this gets out, the court and the public will surely be shaken, and the censor's memorials will flood the imperial study. My mind is made up. Xiao Jingyuan's tone was resolute and decisive. I want them to be shaken, I want them to know. You, Shen Huaiyan, are my person. Whoever dares to touch you is making an enemy of me. He pressed that cold and heavy jade seal into my hand. Take it, this is the authority I give you, and also your talisman of protection. From now on, straighten your back for me, and fear no one. I held that jade seal. Feeling it weighed more than 1,000 pounds, I could feel a scorching heat transmitting from Xianxia's fingertips. I also felt that in those deep eyes of his, there surged emotions I couldn't understand, complex emotions. There was appreciation, there was exploitation, there was control, there was even a trace, hidden extremely deep, loneliness. I raised my head, met his gaze, and said word by word, this servant accepts the decree. From this moment on, I understood, I and this emperor were completely bound together. When one prospers, both prosper. When one falls, both fall. Beneath my feet was a bottomless abyss. Above my head was supreme imperial power. Ever since the news of me taking charge of the deputy seal spread, the entire imperial court and harem fell into an eerie silence. Those previously rampant rumors vanished without a trace overnight. No one dared to gossip about me behind my back anymore, calling me a demoness. What replaced it was a kind of awe, a kind of fear. I was still that female official before the emperor serving with brush and ink in the imperial study every day, but everyone knew I was different now. I had become the second person in the Forbidden City. Aside from the emperor, who could decide the fate of memorials, I had become a sharp sword hanging over the heads of all officials, and no one knew when it would fall. Those officials who originally belonged to the crown prince's faction, now took detours when they saw me, afraid of being seen by me and remembered in my heart. And those officials who remained neutral or secretly harbored dissatisfaction with the crown prince, began to curry favor with me in various subtle ways. Sometimes it was a box of fine pastries, sometimes a precious jeweled hairpin, sometimes a rare ancient book. The gifts weren't expensive, but they represented an attitude, a taking of sides. I refused all of it, ignored all of it. Everything sent to me, I handed over intact to Li Dequan, having him register it and submit it all to the national treasury. Through this method, I made my attitude clear to everyone. And to Xiao Jingyuan as well. I Shen Huaiyan am a blade in his hand, not a chess piece that can be bought. My life became more regular than ever before. Every day I rose at the hour of yin, and by the hour of Mao arrived at the imperial study, arranging everything properly. Then I would begin reviewing the mountain of memorials sent from the Office of Transmission. These memorials came from all over the country, covering all sorts of matters. There were urgent military reports from the borderlands, local people's hardships, officials impeaching each other, and countless flattering words. I had to sort them by priority in the shortest time possible. The urgent ones I marked with yellow tags and placed on the left side of Xiao Jingyuan's desk. The secondary ones I marked with blue tags and placed on the right side. As for those trivial matters, I would directly stamp them with the deputy seal, write the character noted, and send them back. At first, I worked with trepidation as if treading on thin ice, afraid that one careless mistake would cause me to miss important intelligence or misjudge urgent state affairs. But gradually, I discovered that Xiao Jingyuan seemed to have an extraordinary trust in me. He never checked the memorials I had approved with the deputy seal, nor did he ever ask which memorials I had classified as secondary. He would simply finish handling the few most important memorials on his left each day, then begin reading books, playing chess, or resting with his eyes closed. As if the entire realm was operating in an orderly manner within the tacit understanding between him and me. Such days continued for nearly a month. My name had already become a special existence in the imperial court. Everyone knew that there was a Lady Shen in the imperial study. She did not interfere with state affairs, yet she was influencing them at every moment. She was the most powerful and most mysterious female official in the history of the Great Zhou dynasty. On this day the Marquis of Dingbei, Lin Yuan, returned to the capital from Yanmen Pass on the western border. to report on his duties. He was the general personally appointed by Xiao Jingyuan and sent to guard the backup grain route at Yunjiang City. His return meant that the grain supply to the western border had been completely stabilized. Xiao Jingyuan summoned him in the Imperial study. This was the first time I had seen this legendary Marquis of Dingbei. He was about 40-something years old, with a burly build and a dark complexion. A scar running from his brow bone to the corner of his mouth made him look particularly fierce. He wore a suit of heavy armor, and with each step he took into the study, there was a resounding clang of metal colliding. As soon as he entered, those sharp eyes like an eagle's locked onto me. His gaze was filled with scrutiny and undisguised contempt. Clearly, he had also heard those rumors about me circulating in the capital city. In the eyes of an iron-blooded soldier like him, a woman like me who rose to power through the monarch's favor was the most despicable. I paid no mind to his gaze, simply quietly brewing tea for the two of them, then retreated to the side and stood with my hands lowered. Minister Lin, the journey must have been arduous. Xiao Jingyuan's voice carried a hint of amusement. Sharing your majesty's burdens is this subject's duty. What hardship is there to speak of? Lin Yuan's voice was loud and resonant as a bell. Everything at Cloud City has been arranged properly. Reporting to your majesty. Everything is in order. Lin Yuan took out a map from his chest and spread it open on the desk. This is the backup supply route map that this subject has replanned according to Lady Official Shen's suggestion. Once this route is activated, even if Yanmen Pass falls, our army's provisions can reach the front lines within 10 days. When he mentioned the words Lady Official Shen, his tone carried a barely perceptible mockery. Xiao Jingyuan smiled without speaking, instead turning his gaze toward me. Weian, you come take a look too. My heart jumped in alarm. Not daring to disobey, I could only brace myself and step forward. Lin Yuan's brow furrowed even deeper. Letting a woman participate in military and state affairs was, in his view, simply absurd. I walked to the desk, my gaze falling on the map. It was an extremely detailed map, with mountains, rivers, passes, and key routes all clearly marked. I don't understand military formations and troop deployments, but these past few days, I've reviewed countless memorials submitted from various regions regarding weather, hydrology, and geography. My gaze quickly locked onto an inconspicuous river on the map. My lord. I spoke softly, my voice trembling slightly. This river is called Wuding River, right? Lin Yuan froze for a moment, seemingly not expecting me to ask this. That is correct. A few days ago, this servant read a hydrological report from Shuzhou. It said that this year the northern region has had exceptionally abundant rainfall and the water level of Wuding River is more than 3 feet higher than the same period in previous years. The report also said that based on past experience, once autumn arrives, Shuozhou will definitely have continuous heavy rain. When that happens, the river will surely surge. And this pontoon bridge on your map probably won't hold. Once the pontoon bridge is washed away, the supply route will be cut off for at least half a month. I wonder, my lord, do you have a contingency plan? As my words fell, the entire Imperial study fell into dead silence. The contempt and disdain on Lin Yuan's face instantly froze. He stared at me as if he'd seen a ghost, then looked down at that little river on the map that he hadn't taken seriously at all. Cold sweat gradually seeped out on his forehead. He only considered the military offense and defense, but completely overlooked seemingly insignificant details like weather and terrain, and this detail, once it erupts, will be fatal. After a long while, he finally raised his head, and the way he looked at me had completely changed. In there was shock, there was shame, but more than that was a kind of heartfelt admiration. He cupped his fists toward me, this woman he had just looked down upon with utter contempt, in a solemn gesture. Lady Shen, you have enlightened this humble general. This humble general thanks you. Xiao Jingyuan watched this scene, a satisfied smile appearing on his face. That evening, after I returned to the side hall, a young eunuch quietly delivered a wooden box. He said it was sent by the Marquis of Dingbei. I opened the wooden box, and inside there were no gold, silver, or jewels, only a dagger with an ancient design, gleaming with cold light. On the sheath of the dagger the character Lin was engraved. I gripped that cold dagger, yet a warm current surged in my heart. I knew that from today on, in this palace full of hidden dangers, besides Xiao Jingyuan, I had gained my first person who could perhaps be called an ally. My path was still difficult, but at least I was no longer fighting alone. The first month of my holding the deputy seal passed without incident. The entire court seemed to have fallen into a subtle balance because of my presence. Crown Prince Xiaoche was confined to the Eastern Palace and became much more compliant. The Empress's faction also restrained their edge because the Emperor had given Uncle Wangru a few light but pointed warnings. Those fence-sitters in the court who had been wavering now carefully tried to discern His Majesty's intentions, not daring to take sides easily anymore. Everything seemed so calm. But I knew this was just the calm before the storm. Beneath the tranquil surface, undercurrents were already surging, with deadly traps lurking everywhere. Xianxia was not someone who would admit defeat easily. The humiliation he suffered would only make him like a viper lurking in the shadows, waiting for the next chance to strike a fatal blow, and I was the thorn in his eye that most needed to be removed. On this day, as usual, I was organizing memorials in the Imperial study. Li Dequan, carrying a stack of newly delivered reports, walked in silently. His expression was somewhat unusual. Lady Shen. He pulled out the topmost memorial wrapped in a bright yellow cover and handed it to me. This was just submitted by the censorate, 800 Li Express. His Majesty is still resting in the inner chamber and instructed that if there are urgent memorials, you should read them first. Express memorials from the censorate were usually impeachments of high-ranking court officials. Using an 800 Li Express meant the identity of the person being impeached was extraordinary. A sense of foreboding suddenly arose in my heart. I took the memorial, broke the seal, and unfolded it. When I saw clearly what was written on it, my pupils suddenly contracted, my breathing stopped in an instant. The content of the memorial was very simple. The censor-in-chief, together with dozens of censors, jointly impeached the current Grand Tutor, Shen Tingyuan. The charge was embezzlement. The memorial stated that 3 years ago, the lower reaches of the Yellow River burst its banks, and the court allocated 3 million taels of silver for disaster relief and embankment repairs, and Shen Tingyuan, the Grand Tutor who supervised this matter, colluded with local officials, skimming off funds layer by layer and lining his own pockets. The actual silver used for the river works was less than 1 million. As a result, the embankment was built as shoddily as tofu dregs, riddled with hidden dangers. Attached to the back of the memorial were detailed accounts, as well as signed confessions from several local officials. Both witness testimony and physical evidence were complete. It looked like ironclad proof, irrefutable. My hand holding the memorial trembled slightly from the force I was using. It is here, Xiao. His counterattack has finally come, and it came so swiftly, so viciously. He knew that in the Imperial study he couldn't touch me, so he turned his blade toward my only weakness, my family, my father. He wanted to use the survival of the Grand Tutor's household to force me to submit. This was a killing move. If I pleaded for my father, that would be abusing power for personal gain, interfering in state affairs. All the impartial and selfless image I had painstakingly built up before would be destroyed in one fell swoop. Your Majesty's trust in me will also crumble in an instant. If I stand by and do nothing, letting father be convicted, then I'll be branded as disloyal, unfilial, cold-blooded and heartless. Who would dare to side with someone who won't even save their own father? I'll become truly alone, spurned by everyone. No matter which choice I make, it is a dead end. This move of Xianxia is truly vicious. He wants to put me over the fire and roast me slowly, make me taste what it is like to be betrayed by everyone and have nowhere to turn. Make me understand what a miserable fate awaits those who oppose him. My back is gradually soaked with cold sweat, but I know I can't panic, much less lose my composure. Xiao Jingyuan delivered this memorial to me first, rather than reading it himself. That in itself is a deeper test. What he wants to see isn't whether I'll plead for mercy. What he wants to see is whether I have the ability to break through this deadlock. I slowly deeply drew in a breath, forcing myself to calm down. My brain spins at an unprecedented speed. Embezzlement, an old case from 3 years ago. Witness testimony, physical evidence. Behind this seemingly airtight chain of evidence, there must be a flaw. Xiao always acts with quick success in mind, to put me to death as quickly as possible. He couldn't have made everything watertight. I look over and over again, carefully examining every word, every name, every account entry in the memorial. After a long while, I finally fixed my gaze on those few signed confessions. I gently placed the memorial on the table, raised my head, and looked toward Li Dequan, who stood nearby, not daring to breathe loudly. My face had already returned to its usual calm. Chief Steward Li. This servant is here. I trouble you to make a trip to the Imperial City Department. The Imperial City Department was the Emperor's exclusive intelligence agency, independent of the 3 judicial offices, answerable only to the Emperor alone. They were responsible for monitoring officials and gathering intelligence. Wielding immense power and shrouded in utmost secrecy, Li Dequan's expression changed slightly. Lady Shen, you mean, please have the commander of the Imperial City Department make a trip to investigate the people on these confessions. I tapped my fingertip on those names. I want to know who they've met, where they've been in the past month, and whether their household accounts show any silver of unknown origin. Also, I paused, my voice turning ice cold. Go check whether these dozens of officials from the censorate have all recently visited the same place, such as the Eastern Palace. After hearing my words, Li Dequan trembled all over, looking at me with eyes full of awe and shock. He understood. Not only had I not been intimidated, but I was going to launch a counterattack at the first opportunity. Moreover, I would use the sharpest, most direct method to carry the flames of war straight back to the Eastern Palace. This wasn't a plea for mercy, this was a declaration of war. This servant obeys your command. Li Dequan bowed his body and carefully retreated out. In the Imperial study, once again only I remained alone. I walked to the window, looking at the gloomy sky outside. I knew that from this moment on, there was no room for reconciliation between Crown Prince Xiaoqi and me. Either he dies, or I perish. This game of chess had reached its most critical moment, and I was the pawn in Xiao Jingyuan's hand that had crossed the river, charging forward bravely, never retreating. Because behind me was an abyss of 10,000 zhang, the efficiency of the Imperial City Department was astonishingly high. After merely 3 hours, before the sky had completely darkened, Li Dequan brought a middle-aged man wearing a flying fish robe, a spring knife at his waist, and a stern expression, and entered the Imperial study once again. He was the commander of the Imperial City Department, Zhao Wujua, name that only answered to emperor, one that made all the civil and military officials turn pale at the mention. This subordinate Zhao Wuju pays respects to Lady Official Shen. He didn't kneel, only cupped his fists toward me. This was the privilege of the Imperial City Department. Commander Zhao need not be so formal. I nodded and got straight to the point. How did the investigation go? Zhao Wuju took out a thin booklet from his chest and handed it over. Fortunately, I have not failed my mission. The people Lady Official Shen asked to investigate have all been looked into clearly. I took the booklet and opened it. The handwriting inside was clean and efficient, yet every word was shocking. Those local officials who signed as witnesses had all secretly received greetings from people sent by the Eastern Palace over the past month. Their family members overnight were either invited to the capital city or accidentally fell off cliffs. And without exception, their accounts all had an additional huge sum of silver notes. Enough to keep them and their descendants worry-free for generations. As for those censors and officials who jointly submitted the memorial, the Imperial City Department's records were even more detailed. The night before the memorial was submitted, they entered the Eastern Palace in batches, quietly, and didn't leave until dawn. The last page of the booklet also included a list. It recorded that the steward of the Eastern Palace had withdrawn over 500,000 taels of silver in cash from major banks across the capital city in the past half-month, and the destination of all this silver pointed to one place, the residence of the imperial uncle, Wang Ru. All the clues connected together, forming a huge and clear web. At the center of this web was the crown prince, Xiao Qiao, and the one responsible for executing all of this was his dear uncle, Wang Ru. What a brilliant frame-up. What a brilliant case of the villain filing suit first. I closed the booklet, the rage in my heart almost bursting out, but I knew now was not the time to explode. This evidence, though it could prove Shen Tingyuan was framed, was still not enough to deliver a fatal blow to the crown prince and the imperial uncle. Because all the dirty work was done by those below them, Xiao Qi and Wang Ru could easily find a few scapegoats to clear themselves completely. What I need is real, solid evidence that will leave them unable to argue or escape. The embezzlement case from 3 years ago. The breakthrough must lie within this old case itself. I closed my eyes, trying hard to recall all the details from 3 years ago about the Yellow River breach. Back then, I was still at the Grand Tutor's residence, just an insignificant concubine-born daughter, who could only hear bits and pieces of court news from the servants' gossip. I only remember that when Father Shen Tingyuan received this assignment, he looked deeply troubled. He said the funds for river management were allocated every year, yet the embankments collapsed every year. The waters ran very deep. This was a hot potato, a bottomless pit that could never be filled. He said this trip would likely bring more danger than fortune. Later, he returned, though he looked much more haggard. At least he came back safely. The court's commendation came down too, saying he had merit in managing the river. I naively thought he had solved this difficult problem with his own ability and integrity. Thinking about it now, things were definitely not that simple. How could a mess that had troubled even the emperor for decades be easily resolved by him? Behind this, there must be hidden circumstances I don't know about. I suddenly opened my eyes and looked at Zhao Wuju. Commander Zhao, I'd like to ask another favor of you. Please speak. Female official Shen, help me investigate someone. 3 years ago the person who served as the River Works Director General when the Yellow River burst its banks. Zhao Wuju's eyes flickered for a moment. Lady Shen is referring to the former Vice Minister of Revenue, Zhang Chengchen. That is right, it is him. I nodded. Where is this person now? A troubled expression appeared on Zhao Wuju's face. Lady Shen, this person, I am afraid, will be difficult to investigate why, because 3 years ago, after Grand Tutor Shen returned to the capital from the Yellow River construction site, Zhang Chengchen's entire family died suddenly in an accidental fire. The government office's conclusion was accidental fire, nothing suspicious. But Zhao Wuju lowered his voice. The Imperial City Department's secret records note that the fire burned far too cleanly. Over 30 people in the Zhang residence, not a single survivor. Moreover, the fire started first in Zhang Chengchen's study. That is where he kept all his accounts and documents related to the river works over the years. Dead with no testimony. All the leads seemed to end here. My heart sank bit by bit. This was clearly a premeditated murder to silence witnesses. To have such power right under the emperor's nose, to do it so cleanly and efficiently. Apart from the Eastern Palace, there wouldn't be a second person. They had already started laying out their plan 3 years ago. Shen Tingyuan, from the very beginning, was the scapegoat they had chosen. First, they used Shen Tingyuan to fill the hole in the river works and quell the public's grievances. Then they set a fire and burned all the witnesses to death, destroying all the evidence. Finally, they splashed this basin of dirty water back onto Shen Tingyuan at the most critical moment, killing 3 birds with 1 stone. What a ruthless scheme. What a vicious heart. I fell silent for a long time, when suddenly a detail I had overlooked flashed through my mind. My mother, that biological mother of mine, who treated me as a chess piece. I remember 3 years ago, after father returned from the Yellow River, he became a completely different person. He began frequently visiting mother's courtyard, staying for entire nights. And mother, she also seemed like a different person. She no longer spoke coldly to me, but instead often held my hand and said things I couldn't understand. She said, "Life is like chess, once a piece is placed, there is no regret." She said, "Sometimes living takes more courage than dying." I didn't understand back then. Now, I seem to understand something. I raised my head, looking at Zhao Wuju with burning eyes. "Commander, there is one more place I need you to go for me. The Grand Tutor's residence, my birth mother Zhou's courtyard. Don't alert anyone, especially not my father. Go to her room and find something. A rosewood makeup box. In the hidden compartment of the box there should be an old account book. This is my last and only hope. What I am betting on is that my mother, while pushing me into the abyss, also left me a crack sufficient to overturn the entire game." The night, deep as ink, inside the Imperial study, brightly lit, yet terrifyingly silent. Xiao Jingyuan has already returned. He sits across from me, quietly drinking tea, not saying a word. That memorial impeaching Shen Tingyuan lies spread open before him. Zhao Wuju, commander of the Imperial City Department, has already reported everything he investigated to Xiao Jingyuan in full detail, including the matter of me sending him to the Grand Tutor's residence to search for that account book that might exist. After listening, Xiao Jingyuan showed no reaction whatsoever. He wasn't angry, wasn't surprised, didn't even show the slightest emotional fluctuation. He just sat there quietly, his deep eyes like a bottomless ancient well, making it completely impossible to guess what he was thinking. Time passes, second by second, each second feels like a silent death by 1,000 cuts. I kneel on the cold golden bricks, my back straight as a rod, yet my heart is already in turmoil. I don't know how Xiao Jingyuan will view what I've done. Have I been too eager, too sharp and exposed? Have I overstepped the bounds of a female official, of a chess piece? Will he think that I am using the power he granted me to seek personal gain for my own family? Countless thoughts churned through my mind, but I knew that things had come to this point, and any excuses or pretenses would be superfluous. All I could do was wait for this chess player to pass final judgment on me, this chess piece. Finally, a faint sound of footsteps came from outside the hall. Zhao Wuju's figure appeared at the doorway once again. In his hands, he held a rosewood cosmetic box. My heart suddenly leapt to my throat. Success or failure hinged on this moment. Zhao Wuju walked to the center of the great hall, knelt on one knee, and raised the cosmetic box high above his head. "Reporting to your majesty. This humble general has fortunately fulfilled his mission and found this item in Madame Zhou's room at the Grand Tutor's residence. During the search, no one was alerted." Xiao Jingyuan's gaze fell upon that cosmetic box. He said nothing, only exchanged a glance with Li Dequan. Li Dequan immediately understood, carefully stepped forward, took the cosmetic box, and presented it on the imperial desk. Xiao Jingyuan extended his slender fingers and gently opened the lid. Inside the cosmetic box were some ordinary hairpins and jewelry, utterly unremarkable. His fingers lightly tapped on the inner wall of the cosmetic box. A soft click sounded. At the bottom of the makeup box a hidden compartment popped out. Inside the compartment lay an old booklet, tightly wrapped in oil paper. My mother, she really left behind evidence. My eyes instantly became moist. So she wasn't truly that cold and heartless after all, when she pushed me onto this path of no return. In the end, She still left me a thread of hope. Li Dequan took out the booklet and respectfully presented it to Xiao Jingyuan. Xiao Jingyuan opened the booklet. It was an account book. The pages of the account book had already yellowed, but the handwriting was delicate and clear. It was my mother's handwriting. Densely recorded on it were transactions of silver. One after another, every single entry was related to the Yellow River construction funds from 3 years ago, but the destination of this silver was not into Shen Tingyuan's private pockets. Rather, through various complex channels, it all ultimately flowed to the same place. The Eastern Palace. And the various secret businesses of the Imperial uncle Wang Ru. At the end of the account book there was also a letter attached. The letter was written by mother to me. The letter said that back then, Shen Tingyuan was ordered to manage the river, but discovered that the silver for the river construction had long been embezzled completely by the crown prince and the imperial uncle. If he reported it, he would offend the Eastern Palace, a dead end. If he concealed it, it would be the crime of deceiving the emperor, equally a dead end. It was mother who came up with an idea for him, a plan to perish together with the jade and stone, yet able to preserve the Shen family, and even leave evidence for future vindication. That is to use the Shen family's own money to fill that enormous hole. The Shen family had been officials for generations, with a substantial fortune. Pouring out the entire family fortune could barely plug this gap, and as an exchange Shen Tingyuan had to obtain from the crown prince ironclad evidence of their embezzlement. This ledger was the pledge of allegiance the crown prince gave to make Shen Tingyuan keep his mouth shut. At the end of the letter mother said she knew this ledger was a bomb that could explode at any moment. She also knew the crown prince would never let the Shen family go. She sent me to the palace, not because she wanted me to climb the social ladder by attaching myself to the dragon and phoenix. Rather she knew that in all the land only this place, only by the son of heaven's side, was both the safest and most dangerous place. She was using me, using her own biological daughter, to gamble on a future where the Shen family could be vindicated. She sent this most crucial chess piece before the emperor. As for whether this chess piece would live or die, win or lose, could only depend on my fortune and the Son of Heaven's intentions. After reading the letter, my heart was filled with mixed feelings. There was the pain of being deceived, the desolation of being used, but more than that, there was an indescribable complex sense of being moved. So I wasn't a discarded piece after all. I was her final, and most important, high-stakes gamble. Xiao Jingyuan also finished reading the letter. He slowly closed the ledger and letter together, then he raised his head and looked at me. His gaze was unprecedentedly profound. Within it, there was appreciation, there was contemplation, and there was also a trace of faint warmth I had never seen before. He suddenly smiled. His laughter was low, yet filled with an indescribable sense of satisfaction. Good. What a fine saying. Life is like a game of chess. Once a piece is placed, there are no regrets. What a fine daughter of the Shen family. He stood up, walked before me, and personally helped me up from the cold ground. His hand was warm and strong. Your mother was right. She delivered the chess piece right before me. Then how this game concludes is no longer up to others. He patted the back of my hand, his voice carrying a trace of unquestionable dominance. From now on, you don't need to do anything. And you don't need to think about anything either. Just watch carefully. Watch how I seek justice for you, for the Shen family. In that moment I looked at his towering figure, and those eyes that seemed capable of controlling the world. My heart suddenly skipped a beat. I suddenly understood that from the moment I pointed at the dragon throne. My life had already become tightly entangled with this man's. Between us, there was ruler and subject, there was chess player and chess piece, but perhaps, in this thrilling game, something different had also quietly begun to grow. The morning court session the next day arrived more oppressively than ever before. The sky was overcast, leaden gray clouds pressing low over the glazed tiles of the Forbidden City, as if foretelling an approaching storm. Civil and military officials lined up and walked into the Golden Luan Hall, each face bearing speculation and unease. The censorate's impeachment case against the Grand Tutor had already stirred up tremendous waves in the capital city's officialdom yesterday. Everyone knew this wasn't merely an embezzlement case. This was the counterattack horn blown by the long silent Eastern Palace. It was also His Majesty's ultimate test of the Crown Prince. Today's court session would determine the direction of the Great Zhou dynasty's fortunes for decades to come. Crown Prince Xiao Qiao also attended the morning court today. He stood at the head of all officials. His complexion somewhat pale, but his eyes unusually bright, even carrying a hint of triumphant confidence. He believed that this inescapable net he had laid could be broken by no one. That bitch Shen Weian, no matter how much she enjoyed Father Emperor's favor, would surely panic and come begging to him when facing her family's destruction. When that time came, he could not only avenge his humiliation, but also seize the opportunity to completely control that eyesore of a woman. He had even already planned that once the Shen family fell, He would plead with Father Emperor to demote Shen Weian to the lowest slave servant of the Eastern Palace, tormenting her day and night, making her unable to live or die. Thinking of this, a cruel smile curved at the corner of his mouth. On the dragon throne, Xiao Jingyuan's face was expressionless, revealing neither joy nor anger. He merely tapped the armrest of the dragon throne with his fingers, intermittently and lightly. That dull sound was like a heavy hammer, striking upon everyone's heart. Ministers, if there are matters to report, step forward; if not, court is dismissed. Li Dequan's shrill voice pierced through the deathly silence of the Golden Luan Hall. As soon as he finished speaking, the chief censor immediately stepped out from the ranks, holding an ivory tablet in both hands, and declared loudly, "Your Majesty, this subject has a memorial to present. This subject, together with 53 colleagues from the censorate, impeaches the current Grand Tutor Shen Tingyuan for embezzling state funds while supervising the Yellow River disaster relief 3 years ago, resulting in neglected maintenance of the river embankments and endless hidden dangers. This act disregards the imperial grace, brings calamity to the nation and its people, and is an unpardonable crime. This subject humbly begs your Majesty to strip Shen Tingyuan of his office, investigate him thoroughly, and execute him according to law as a warning to others." His voice was forceful and resounding, each word striking with weight. As his words fell, a large group of officials immediately knelt behind him. "We subject second the motion." The momentum was overwhelming, the pressure imposing. This wasn't an impeachment, this was clearly a power play. Xiao Chao stood to the side, the triumphant look in his eyes no longer concealable. Everyone's gaze focused on the person sitting on the dragon throne, waiting for his judgment. Xiao Jingyuan finally stopped tapping the armrest. He slowly raised his eyes, his gaze sweeping over the group of loyal subjects kneeling below. His eyes were as calm as a pool of stagnant water, yet carried a sharpness that saw through everything. "My dear ministers, are you all finished speaking?" His voice wasn't loud yet, it clearly reached every corner of the Golden Luan Hall. The Grand Censor's heart trembled for some reason. He suddenly had an ominous premonition, but he still braced himself and said, "Your Majesty, what we ministers have said is all true. With solid evidence, we beseech your Majesty's judgment." Solid evidence. Xiao Jingyuan suddenly laughed. That smile was cold and mocking. What fine solid evidence? He gave Li Dequan behind him a look. "Li Dequan, this servant is here. Read out my solid evidence for all the dear ministers to hear." Li Dequan, bowing, took out a booklet from his sleeve. It was that very ledger found in the hidden compartment of the rosewood makeup box. Xiao Chai's pupils suddenly contracted. What was that thing? Why would it be in Father Emperor's hands? In his heart, that ominous premonition grew even stronger. Li Dequan cleared his throat and began to read aloud in his distinctive penetrating voice. In the spring of the 23rd year of Jianan, the Yellow River burst its banks. The court allocated the first batch of disaster relief, silver totaling 1 million taels. Released from the Ministry of Revenue's treasury, handled by the imperial uncle-in-law, Wang Ru. This sum of silver was not transported to the disaster area, but instead transferred in 3 batches to the Four Seas Connect Silver House in the capital city, ultimately flowing into the Eastern Palace's private treasury, totaling 800,000 taels. That same summer, His Majesty allocated another 2 million taels for river works, released from the Imperial Household Department, handled by, once again, the imperial uncle-in-law, Wang Ru. This sum of silver, laundered through the Fuyuan Money House in Jiangnan, with 1,500,000 taels used to purchase private property of the Jiangnan Weaving Bureau, and the remaining 500,000 taels, whereabouts unknown. With each sentence, Li Dequan recited. The atmosphere in the court grew heavier by a measure. With each sentence recited, the Crown Prince Xiao Chai's complexion grew paler by a shade. As for the imperial uncle-in-law Wang Ru, he was already drenched in sweat, his legs trembling. Nearly fainting, this ledger recorded everything in far too much detail: time, location, handlers, amounts of silver, even which banking houses processed the accounts, all written out crystal clear. How is this possible? Hadn't all those who knew about it back then already been dealt with cleanly? Where the hell did this ledger come from? Li Dequan's voice continued to echo within the Golden Luan Hall. In summary, of the Yellow River disaster relief and dike repair funds, totaling 3 million taels, 2,300,000 taels were embezzled by the imperial uncle-in-law Wang Ru and His Highness the Crown Prince, taken for their own. Grand Tutor Shen Tingyuan, to fill the deficit and preserve the river embankment, exhausted his family fortune and sold his ancestral property, raising a total of 2,500,000 taels of silver, all used for the river works. Here are the old account books from the Shen family's accounting office, as well as pawn ticket stubs from all the major pawnshops and money houses in the capital city as proof. When the last word fell, the entire Golden Luan Hall was silent as death, so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Everyone was shocked, speechless and scared out of their wits by this earth-shattering reversal embezzlement. The real embezzler wasn't Grand Tutor Shen Tingyuan, but the current crown prince and the national uncle, and what they embezzled was disaster relief funds. A matter of life and death. This was no longer just corruption, this was shaking the foundation of the nation, this was treason. Wang Rui let out a desperate wail, his eyes rolled back and he collapsed on the spot, unconscious. As for Crown Prince Xiaoqie, his face was ashen, his whole body trembling like a leaf in the wind. Father Emperor, your son has been wronged. This is slander, it is a frame-up. He dropped to his knees with a thud, kowtowing desperately toward the dragon throne. It must be the Shen family. It must be the Shen family forging fake accounts to clear themselves. Father Emperor, you must see clearly, so satisfying, so damn satisfying. You know what, when I was writing this plot twist, I literally wrote it all in one go without stopping. It is that kind of finally, it is your turn to cry thrill. However he humiliated the female lead before, that is exactly how he is now kneeling on the ground begging for mercy. This is what I meant, the wheel of fortune turns 30 years on the East Bank, 30 years on the West Bank. Sisters, remember this. Don't be too arrogant when bullying others, because you never know what trump card the other person is hiding. Forged. Xiao Jingyuan slowly rose to his feet, an overwhelming aura like mountains collapsing and earth splitting instantly enveloped the entire hall. He descended the imperial steps one by one, stopping right in front of Xiao Chao. He looked down at this son, in whom he had once placed such high hopes. His eyes containing no anger, only bone-chilling coldness and disappointment. Do you think I would convict you based on a single ledger? He spoke coldly toward the outside of the hall. Bring him in. As his words fell, several mounted guards from the Imperial City Department escorted in a prisoner wearing shackles and chains, gaunt and haggard in appearance. When Xiaoqie clearly saw that person's face, the last trace of color completely drained from him. Zhang Cheng. The former river works governor Zhang Chengchen, who should have died 3 years ago in an accidental fire, he was actually still alive. Traitorous son. Xiao Jingyuan's voice carried not a trace of emotion. What else do you have to say? Xiaoqie opened his mouth, but couldn't utter a single word. He only felt the world spinning around him, his vision went dark and he too fainted and collapsed. Xiao Jingyuan couldn't even be bothered to look at him again. He turned around, facing the dumbstruck civil and military officials, his voice like ice from the 9 depths of hell, echoing throughout the great hall. Relay my decree. The imperial uncle Wang Ru, corrupt and lawless, treating human lives like grass, is stripped of all titles and ranks, thrown into the heavenly prison, awaiting judgment. The Wang clan shall have their assets confiscated, and for 3 generations, none may enter officialdom. Crown Prince Xiaoqie, unworthy of his position, forming factions for personal gain, framing the loyal and virtuous effective immediately, is confined to the Eastern Palace to reflect on his mistakes. Until the matter is investigated, he shall not participate in any state affairs. Grand Tutor Shen Tingyuan, loyal to the sovereign and devoted to the nation, of noble character and integrity, serving country and people, willing to endure grave injustice, is promoted to Grand Preceptor, rewarded with 10,000 taels of gold and 1,000 bolts of brocade. As for those, his gaze slowly swept over those kneeling on the ground, already scared out of their wits, the censors and remonstrance officials. Those who aided the tyrant, who turned black into white, are all dismissed from office, never to be employed again. One decree after another, like thunderbolts, exploded in the Golden Luan Hall. The entire court had completely changed. The storm in the Golden Luan Hall with an overwhelming force swept across the entire capital city. Uncle of the state Wang Rui was thrown into the heavenly prison. Crown Prince Xiaoqie was completely confined, stripped of all power. Dozens of censors and officials were dismissed on the spot. Grand Tutor Shen Tingyuan, his grievances cleared, was appointed Grand Preceptor. This series of earth-shattering changes caught everyone off guard. The Eastern Palace faction, once overwhelmingly powerful and stable, as Mount Tai crumbled and vanished into dust overnight. The entire power structure of the capital city was completely reshuffled. Countless people in this upheaval lived in constant fear and anxiety, and countless others secretly celebrated seeing new hope. And at the center of the storm, the Eastern Palace had now become a true cage. The palace gate was tightly shut, guards stood everywhere, not even a fly could escape. Those palace servants who used to fawn over power had now scattered like birds and beasts. The entire Eastern Palace appeared desolate and deathly silent. Inside Yuxiu Palace, there was nothing but weeping. The Empress, dressed in plain clothes, knelt before the Buddhist hall, her face already covered in tears, sobbing uncontrollably. She couldn't understand how things had turned out this way. Her son, the crown prince she was so proud of, how could he have fallen from the clouds into hell overnight? And Xiaoqie, Ever since being carried back from the Golden Luan Hall had locked himself in his sleeping quarters, not eating, not drinking, and not seeing anyone, he was like a severely wounded beast in his own den, frantically licking his wounds. He didn't believe it, he couldn't accept it. Everything he had painstakingly built over more than 20 years, his position as crown prince, his towering ambitions, just like that, gone. No, he suddenly swept everything off the desk onto the floor, creating a loud clattering crash. I haven't lost, I still have Mother Empress. I still have my maternal grandfather's military power. Father Emperor is just angry for the moment. He won't really depose me. I am his only legitimate son. This realm will be mine sooner or later. His eyes bloodshot, looking like a madman, in the empty bedchamber he consoled himself over and over again. Stop. Did you all see that? This is a textbook case of love brain plus power brain in its terminal stage. Sisters, I actually laughed out loud when I wrote this part. He is still there hypnotizing himself with I still have Mother Empress. I still have military power, bro. Wake up, your dad just deposed you. You think he'll leave your maternal grandfather's military power for you to make a comeback? This isn't naive, this is stupid. This is what I am saying. Some people even till death don't understand where they lost. He thinks he lost to Shen Weian, but actually he lost to his own arrogance and stupidity. But deep in his heart, there was a voice telling him everything was over. That Zhang Chengchen who should have died 3 years ago was like a vengeful ghost from hell. His appearance had torn all his schemes, all his hopes, to shreds. Father Emperor would never give him any chance again. And the instigator of all this, that name he hated to the bone, surfaced in his mind once again. Shen Weian, that bitch again. If it weren't for her, how would he have ended up in this situation today? It was her who bewitched Father Emperor. It was her who ruined everything for him. Shen Weian. He roared through gritted teeth, his voice filled with endless resentment and unwillingness. If I don't die, one day I will tear you into 10,000 pieces. The Empress's tearful pleas and the Crown Prince's roars naturally reached the Imperial study. Xiao Jingyuan sat behind his desk, quietly flipping through an ancient text, turning a deaf ear to everything outside. As if the crying and wailing from the Eastern Palace were nothing more than a gust of wind outside the window, a bird's chirp unable to affect his state of mind in the slightest. I stood to the side, carefully grinding ink for him. My heart, too, could not remain calm. Although my great revenge had been avenged and my family preserved, but seeing the once high and mighty Crown Prince and Empress end up in such a miserable state, I couldn't help but feel some melancholy. The Imperial family was indeed the most heartless and cruelest place under heaven, ruthless to enemies. Even more ruthless to their own. Scared, Xiao Jingyuan suddenly spoke, asking without lifting his head. My hand trembled, and I quickly lowered my head. This servant dares not. What I am asking is not whether you dare or not. He put down the book, raised his eyes, and looked at me with a deep gaze. What I am asking is, seeing how I dealt with my own biological son, do you feel in your heart that I am too cold-blooded and heartless, and thus feel afraid? His question was too direct, and too piercing to the heart. I understood, this was yet another test from him. It was also him, revealing to me the truest side of his inner self. I took a deep breath, met his gaze, and answered seriously, word by word, in response to your majesty, this servant is afraid. What this servant fears is the Emperor's wrath, like thunder striking down, with millions of corpses and blood flowing for thousands of miles. But this servant respects even more. What this servant respects is that in your majesty's heart, there is justice, unbound by family affection, unmoved by power and influence. When a prince breaks the law, he is guilty just like a commoner. This servant has only seen these words in books. Today this servant witnessed it with my own eyes. Your Majesty is a true emperor for the ages. To serve by your Majesty's side is this servant's fortune of 3 lifetimes. I wasn't lying. At this moment toward him, I truly felt awe and admiration. He might be heartless, but he was definitely a qualified, even great emperor. He could, for the sake of so-called justice, personally sever his own son's future with his own hands. This kind of courage, this kind of decisiveness, throughout history, how many could achieve it? After hearing my words, Xiao Jingyuan fell silent for a long time. In his eyes, a trace of complex emotions flickered. There was approval, there was relief, and there was also a trace of faint loneliness that I couldn't understand. He slowly stood up and walked in front of me. He reached out his hand and gently brushed over the faded scar at the corner of my forehead. His movements were very light, very gentle. In my life, I have heard countless flattering words. Only what you said today pleases me the most. Weian, remember this. As long as you remain my understanding flower forever, I will be able to protect you for a lifetime and no one will be able to harm you in the slightest. His voice was deep and magnetic like a promise, but even more like a shackle, binding me and him tightly together. My heart skipped a beat, and my cheeks felt slightly hot. Just then, Li Dequan walked in from outside the hall holding a bright yellow imperial edict. He presented the imperial edict before Xiao Jingyuan. Your Majesty, the edict to depose the crown prince has been drafted. Please review it. Xiao Jingyuan took the edict. And without even looking at it, he directly picked up the imperial jade seal from the table and stamped it down heavily. The bright red ink pad fell upon that edict, also drawing a bloody end to this struggle for the position of crown prince that had lasted over 20 years. Issue the decree. His voice returned to its former majesty and coldness. Proclaim it to the world. That afternoon, an imperial edict deposing the crown prince was issued from the palace, spreading to every corner of the capital city, and was sent to all parts of the country at the fastest speed. Crown Prince Xiao Che was stripped of his title and reduced to commoner status, confined for life to the imperial mausoleum in the suburbs of the capital to guard the tombs of his ancestors, forbidden to leave without an edict. The Eastern Palace thus became history. The position of heir apparent of the great Zhou dynasty was, from this moment, left vacant. The entire realm was shaken by this. A new era quietly arrived, baptized in blood and tears. The imperial edict deposing the heir was like a powerful medicine, completely quelling all the unrest and anxiety in the capital city. As Crown Prince Xiao Che was secretly escorted to the imperial mausoleum in a crude prison cart, as the emperor's brother-in-law Wang Rui committed suicide in the heavenly prison out of guilt. As the Shen family's grievances were redressed, Grand Preceptor Shen Tingyuan was restored to his original position, and even enjoyed greater honor and favor than before. This heart-stopping truth finally came to a close. The capital city returned to its former tranquility. Only everyone knew that some things had changed forever. Shen residence. When Shen Tingyuan returned from the palace wearing his brand new Grand Preceptor's court robes, all the servants of the Shen family knelt at the entrance, weeping tears of joy. Shen Tingyuan looked at everything familiar before him, also shedding tears of age, filled with emotion. In just 1 month, he had experienced tremendous ups and downs from heaven to hell, and from hell back to the mortal world. This recovery of what was lost gave him new insights into life and power. He walked into the hall and saw my mother, Lady Zhou, standing in the center, waiting for him. Their eyes met, and this man and woman who had been surface level husband and wife for half a lifetime both had eyes filled with complex emotions. In the end, it was Shen Tingyuan who spoke first. He faced Lady Zhou, this concubine he had once looked down upon, and solemnly, deeply, bowed to her. Madam, all these years, you've worked hard. And I've wronged you. With one sentence Lady Zhou's eyes instantly reddened. She had waited half a lifetime for these words. All her forbearance, all her scheming, all her sacrifices. In this moment it was all worth it. The next day, Shen Tingyuan personally entered the palace to thank Xiao Jingyuan for his grace. After expressing his gratitude, he didn't leave immediately but made a request. He wanted to see me. Xiao Jingyuan granted it. The meeting place was at the pavilion in the Imperial Garden. When I arrived at the pavilion wearing a light cyan palace attendant's outfit, my father, the current Grand Tutor, Shen Tingyuan, was already waiting there. He looked at me, and in his eyes there was no longer the contempt and indifference of the past. In their place was a complex emotion mixed with guilt, gratitude, and awe. He opened his mouth as if wanting to say something, but didn't know where to begin. In the end, he simply faced me. This illegitimate daughter he had once regarded as worthless as grass, and slowly bent at the waist. Your father thanks you. He didn't call himself, this official, nor did he use a commanding tone. What he used was as your father. I hurried forward and helped him up. Father, you are being too kind to your daughter. Everything your daughter has done is for the Shen family. We are family. Shen Tingyuan murmured these 3 words repeatedly, his eyes gradually reddening. Yes, family. Only today did he truly understand the weight of these 3 words. Only today did he truly see clearly what an extraordinary and unparalleled woman his daughter was. Father and daughter faced each other in silence, yet it was worth more than 1,000 words. All the estrangement and resentment vanished into thin air at this moment. After saying goodbye to father, I also received Xiao Jingyuan's special permission to return to the Shen residence once to see my mother. Our meeting didn't involve the imagined tearful embrace, nor any intense questioning and explanations. We simply sat in the courtyard like the most ordinary mother and daughter, drinking tea and chatting about trivial household matters, until finally, she held my hand and said softly, Weian, mother has wronged you, but mother has no regrets. I held her cold hand in return and shook my head with a smile. Mother, I understand. I have no regrets either. We both understood that our lives had long been drawn into that game called fate. We were all just chess pieces, unable to control our own destinies, but at least, we fought with everything we had, for ourselves and for our family, and won the final victory. That is enough. As for Shen Mingyura, my once high and mighty legitimate elder sister, The former crown princess, on the third day after she was confined to Yuxiu Palace, news came that she had fallen ill from longing and unfortunately passed away. I know this was just the excuse the royal family gave to preserve their last bit of dignity. Her true end was perhaps a cup of poisoned wine, a white silk sash, quietly bringing her to an end in that magnificent palace. The victor becomes king, the loser becomes bandit. This was her own choice and the price she had to pay. I felt no sadness for her, nor did I gloat over her misfortune. In my heart there was only calm. From the moment she brought out that bowl of almond cream, the sisterly bond between us was completely severed. From now on, separated by life and death, no more ties. After handling all family matters, my heart finally settled down completely. My life seemed to have gone through a complete baptism and gained new life. I was no longer that humble and timid concubine's daughter Shen Weian who let others bully her. I was also no longer that imperial lady official who was bent on revenge and calculated every step. Who am I? Where will I go? For the first time, I began to seriously think about this question. That evening, after handling all government affairs, Xiao Jingyuan didn't read or rest as usual. He walked up to me and looked at me quietly. His gaze was gentle and focused, as if he wanted to draw me in. Wei Ain. He softly called my name. Now the dust has settled. The crown prince has been deposed. The Shen family is safe. Have you ever thought about your own future? My heart suddenly skipped a beat. I knelt down on the ground. Everything this servant has was given by your majesty. This servant wishes to serve your majesty for life, willing to die 10,000 deaths without regret. I don't want you to serve me. But he shook his head, bent down, and pulled me up from the ground. He held my hand, pulled me in front of him, forcing me to meet his eyes. In his eyes burned a blazing flame I had never seen before. What I am asking is, what do you yourself want? Do you want to leave these palace walls, return to your family, and live an ordinary life of supporting a husband and raising children? Or, he paused, his voice becoming hoarse and deep, or are you willing to stay, remain by my side, and together with me, behold these vast lands and prosperous glory? I was stunned. I looked at his handsome face, so close before me, feeling the scorching heat coming from his palm, hearing his words that were almost equivalent to a confession. My mind went completely blank. At the victory banquet, I granted you a favor, allowing you to choose your own husband. At that time, you chose me. The corners of his mouth curved into a beautiful arc. Today, I want to ask you again, Shen Weian, are you still willing to choose me? This time it is not a favor from a ruler to a subject, but rather Xiao Jingyuan's heartfelt promise to a woman. Outside the window, a bright moon quietly rose. Its cold radiance passed through the window lattice, spilling onto us. I looked into his eyes, and in those deep eyes, like a sea of stars, my shocked and flushed cheeks were clearly reflected. My heartbeat was like beating drums. I knew that my life had once again reached a most important crossroads, and this choice would determine all the joys and sorrows of the rest of my life. My heart in that instant seemed to stop beating. Time and space seemed to be completely frozen by the immense power contained in his words. Xiao Jingyuan's heartfelt promise to a woman. These 10 words were like a scorching brand, deeply engraved upon my soul. I stared at him blankly, looking at those eyes that were no longer deep as the sea, but burning with blazing flames. In them, there was nervousness I had never seen before, anticipation, and even a trace of vulnerability hidden extremely deep. So it turns out, this supreme ruler who controls the life and death of all under heaven, when saying these words, would also fear being rejected. So it turns out, he too would have such a burning side. My eyes without warning moistened. Tears like pearls with broken strings, uncontrollably slid down from my cheeks. These weren't tears of sorrow, nor tears of grievance, but rather a kind of joy, like surviving a disaster. After experiencing endless darkness and coldness, finally seeing light and feeling warmth. My life from birth has been a tragedy, used as a chess piece by my birth mother, regarded as worthless as grass by my so-called father, seen as a thorn in the eye, a thorn in the flesh by my legitimate sister, publicly humiliated and trampled into mud by the man I'd admired for 10 years. I thought my entire life would be spent in schemes, exploitation, and hatred. I thought that between him and me, it would forever only be the relationship of ruler and subject, chess player and chess piece. I never thought, and never dared to think, that one day, this man standing at the pinnacle of power would shed all his majesty and calculations and use his truest given name to make me a promise concerning a lifetime. What is wrong? Seeing me only crying without speaking. The flame in his eyes seemed to dim a little. His voice also carried a trace of barely perceptible hoarseness. You are unwilling. I shook my head vigorously. I was afraid he'd misunderstand, desperately wanting to speak, but because of the choking in my throat I couldn't get a single word out. I could only use all the strength in my body to grip back his warm and broad hand. Then, under his gaze slowly, I rose up on my tiptoes. I lifted my head, pressing my cold lips gently onto his equally burning lips, a fleeting touch separating the moment we met, yet it was enough to express all my feelings. Xiao Jingyuan's body clearly stiffened for a moment. He seemed completely unprepared for me, who had always been respectful and proper, to make such a bold move. A flash of astonishment crossed his eyes, which was then completely overwhelmed by an avalanche of wild joy. He could no longer restrain his emotions. He reached out his other hand and tightly pulled me into his broad and solid embrace. He lowered his head and with an almost reverent gesture, kissed me again. This time, it was no longer tentative, no longer a promise, but a man's deepest, most passionate declaration to the woman he loves. I closed my eyes, clumsily yet passionately responding to him. In the air the faint ambergris mixed with the elegant ink fragrance on my body, intertwining into an intoxicating scent. In this moment I was no longer Imperial attendant, Shen Weian, and he was no longer the Xiao Jingyuan of before. We are just an ordinary pair in this world, a man and woman whose hearts are connected. After a long while, our lips parted, both of our breaths were somewhat hurried. He gently pressed my head against his chest. I could clearly hear his steady heart, beating violently for me at an unprecedented speed. Weian. He gently rubbed the top of my head with his chin, his voice hoarse yet filled with the cherishing of something lost and found again. The first time I chose His Majesty, it was to survive, to not become a laughingstock. I leaned in his embrace, speaking softly. The second time I chose His Majesty, it was to protect the Shen family, to prevent my loved ones from suffering injustice and humiliation. This time, I raised my head, meeting his gentle gaze, speaking each word clearly and distinctly. This subject wishes to choose for herself this once. What this subject chooses is not the lofty emperor, nor a protector who can shelter me. What this subject chooses is you, Xiao Jingyuan. The moment I spoke his name, I saw him smile. That smile was like a spring breeze, dispersing all the gloom and loneliness between his brows, making this emperor, who usually commanded respect without anger, instantly become like a youth who had obtained his beloved treasure, bright and radiant. Good. He nodded heavily, holding me even tighter. In my entire life, I have never been as joyful as I am at this moment. He released me, took my hand, and walked to the window. Outside the window, the bright moon shone brilliantly, and the starlight sparkled. Wei, and I know you've suffered a lot. I also know that I once used you and tested you, but from now on, never again. I don't want you to be my blade or my pawn anymore. I want you to be my empress, to be the sole mistress of this great Zhou dynasty. Standing side by side with me, sharing these vast lands, Empress. These two words were like a thunderclap exploding in my mind. I looked at him in shock, hardly daring to believe my own ears. Your Majesty. This absolutely cannot be. This servant comes from humble origins. My virtue doesn't match the position. How could I? Your origins are for me to decide. He interrupted me, his tone brooking no argument. Your virtue, I know better than anyone. I know this path will be very difficult. In the court there will surely be criticism. Within the Imperial clan, there will surely be obstruction. But you don't need to fear anything. If the sky falls, I'll hold it up for you. I will clear all obstacles for you and pave all the roads. I only ask you one thing. He cupped my face, gazing at me with burning eyes. Are you willing to face this storm in the court together with me? I looked at the determination and deep affection in his eyes, and in my heart there was no longer any hesitation or fear. I nodded vigorously, tears mixed with laughter. This subject is willing. Yes, I am willing. From the moment I pointed at the dragon throne, my life had already been firmly bound together with his. Since that is the case, then let's live and die together without fear. Aunt Xiao Jingyuan made a decision. It was like an arrow released from the bow, with no room for turning back. Early the next morning, an imperial edict was issued from the imperial study and sent to the Ministry of Rights and the imperial clan court. The content of the imperial edict was simple, yet it stirred up a storm in the entire court that was 10 times more violent than the crown prince's deposition. The emperor decreed to confer upon the imperial lady-in-waiting Shen Weian the title of imperial noble consort, granting her residence in Changshan Palace, the empress's ceremonial privileges, and overall authority over the 6 palaces. Imperial noble consort. This position had rarely been conferred since the founding of Great Zhou, because it was only one step away from the empress position. Once established, it meant that this woman was the future mother of the nation, the only candidate for empress, and enjoying the empress's ceremonial privileges and having overall authority over the 6 palaces was an unprecedented favor. This was almost equivalent to handing over the entire harem to me before the official conferment. When the news spread, the court and the public were shaken. Everyone was stunned speechless by Xiao Jingyuan's earth-shattering move. After a brief moment of shock came a tidal wave of opposition. At the morning court session, inside the Golden Luan Hall, the atmosphere was so tense it could almost drip water, led by the newly appointed censor, in chief Li Guangyuan. Dozens of censors knelt in unison at the center of the hall, tearfully and passionately arguing the pros and cons. Your Majesty, this absolutely must not happen. Li Guangyuan, over 60 years old, wept bitterly as he knocked his head against the ground. Since ancient times, the mistress of the central palace, the mother of the nation, must come from a prestigious family, a woman of noble virtue and conduct. Although Lady Shen has rendered service to the state, she was born a concubine's daughter and behaved recklessly at the victory banquet, which is already known throughout the realm. If such a woman is made empress, would it not invite ridicule from all under heaven and bring shame upon the imperial family? The foundation of the nation would be shaken, propriety and law would collapse. It all begins here. The officials behind him chimed in one after another. We beseech your Majesty to reconsider. We beseech your Majesty to rescind this decree, and choose another virtuous lady to ease the hearts of all subjects under heaven. Their voices grew louder and louder, filled with so-called loyal devotion to sovereign and country. Their reasons for opposition boiled down to 3 points. First, my background. Second, my shocking and scandalous actions at the victory banquet. Third, that women meddling in politics is an omen of national disaster. These reasons, high-sounding and dignified, seemingly for the sake of the nation and its people, were in reality nothing more than to preserve the inherent interests and dignity of these aristocratic clans. They couldn't accept that a lowly concubine, born daughter in their eyes would climb above their heads and become the most noble woman in this country. This would shatter what they had always been proud of, the so-called distinctions of family status and legitimate versus concubine. Born facing this court full of opposing voices, Xiao Jingyuan on the dragon throne remained expressionless as still water, not saying a word. He merely looked coldly at those loyal subjects below who thought so highly of themselves. Only after they had talked themselves dry and their voices gradually died down, did he slowly open his mouth. His voice wasn't loud, yet it carried a chill capable of freezing everything. Finished. Just 3 words made the entire hall instantly fall silent as a grave. Li Guangyuan and the others trembled in their hearts, all feeling a bone-piercing chill. I thought you ministers could come up with some earth-shattering reasoning. The corner of Xiao Jingyuan's mouth curved into a mocking arc. After all this fuss, it is still the same old clichés. Birth. He let out a cold laugh. My empire was carved out by me with blade and spear from mountains of corpses and seas of blood. Not by relying on ancestral blessings, nor on anyone's birth. When I choose an empress, I look at her character, her wisdom, her breadth of mind, not her skill at being reborn into the right family. As for the so-called reckless behavior, his gaze slowly swept across the entire hall. Back then in Zhaoyang Hall, who was it that forced an innocent woman into a corner with no way out, leaving her no choice but to fight with her life? And who was it that gloated on the sidelines, turning a woman's dignity into a joke after drinking? My woman suffered tremendous injustice. Yet she wasn't afraid of power and dared to resist. In my eyes, that is courage, that is fortitude, that is backbone. How is it that in your mouths, it becomes reckless? In my view, the reckless ones are not her, but you lot who can't tell right from wrong, who twist the truth, you so-called disciples of the sages. His words rang out powerfully, like resounding slaps, striking hard across the faces of those censors, leaving them red-faced with shame, wishing they could disappear. At this moment, my father Grand Preceptor Shen Tingyuan stepped forward. He bowed respectfully and declared loudly, Your Majesty is wise and sagacious. This subject believes that Her Highness the Imperial Noble Consort possesses exceptional intelligence and is worthy of being the nation's mother. If not for the Imperial Noble Consort, how could the Yellow River embezzlement case have been brought to light? If not for the Imperial Noble Consort, how could the deposed Crown Prince's conspiracy to frame the loyal have been exposed to the world? Such achievements are sufficient proof that Her Highness the Imperial Noble Consort has the nation at heart, can distinguish right from wrong, and far surpasses many incompetent officials in the court. Immediately after, Marquis of Dingbei Linyuan also stepped forward. He wore full armor, his voice like a great bell. This general also seconds the motion. Imperial Noble Consort, though born a woman, possesses talent for governance. Back then with the western border grain route matter, if not for Her Highness's words of awakening, our hundreds of thousands of troops would have nearly fallen into irredeemable disaster. Such great talent, if criticized merely due to birth, would truly be a misfortune for our great Zhou. With these two taking the lead, those officials in court who had previously been suppressed by the Crown Prince or who came from humble origins also spoke up in agreement one after another. In the court hall, 2 distinctly separate factions instantly formed, arguing endlessly. Xiao Jingyuan, watch this scene. A trace of satisfaction flashing in his eyes. This was exactly the effect he wanted. He wanted everyone to see that the Empress he intended to establish was not a vase who would only stay in the inner palace, but rather someone with ability, with achievements, with supporters, a true virtuous helpmate. Finally, he slowly stood up. An incomparable aura of authority instantly swept through the entire hall, bringing all arguments to an abrupt halt. My mind is made up. His voice, like a final judgment, brooked no doubt. Conferring the title of Imperial Noble Consort upon Lady Shen is only the first step. I want all under heaven to see just how magnificent and worthy my Empress is. Once the western border campaign is settled, and the Crown Prince's remnants are purged, I will hold the grand ceremony to establish her as Empress. This matter requires no further discussion. Whoever dares to say one more word will end up like this tablet. As his words fell, he suddenly grabbed a jade tablet from the Imperial desk and smashed it hard onto the golden bricks. Crack. A crisp sound. The solid jade tablet shattered on impact, breaking into pieces. The entire golden Luan hall fell into a deathly silence. All the opposing officials were scared pale silent as cicadas in winter. They finally understood. This time the emperor had made up his mind. Whoever dared to obstruct would be the next jade tablet shattered to pieces. A new order was forcibly established under an iron-blooded iron fist, and I was the most dazzling and most central star in this new order. That evening, I moved into Changshan Palace. Xiao Jingyuan came to my bedchamber and saw me looking at a list by a solitary lamp. On it were the names of all the officials who supported me in court today. What are you thinking about? He gently embraced me from behind. I turned my head and leaned into his arms. I am thinking that His Majesty used thunderous methods today to suppress the opposing voices. But people's hearts may not truly be convinced. Blocking is not as good as channeling. We need more allies. I handed that list to him. Most of these people come from humble backgrounds or have been suppressed by aristocratic families for years. They are the emerging force, and they are our most solid supporters. Why doesn't Your Majesty make greater use of these people? First, it can break the aristocratic family's monopoly over the court. Second, it will also let all the scholars from humble backgrounds across the realm see hope, and thus wholeheartedly support Your Majesty, support us. After hearing my words, Xiao Jingyuan remained silent for a long time. He simply lowered his head, gazing at the woman in his arms who was not only beautiful but also possessed astonishing wisdom. His eyes were filled with an unprecedented burning admiration and love. He knew he had chosen the right person. What he had gained was not just a woman, but rather a soulmate capable of creating a brand new golden age together with him. All right, he lowered his head and planted an affectionate kiss on my forehead. I'll follow your lead in everything. From now on, we'll rule this realm together. Time flies, years pass like a shuttle. In the blink of an eye, 3 years had passed. Over these 3 years, the great Zhou dynasty had undergone earth-shattering changes under Xiao Jingyuan's iron-fisted rule and my assistance. A profound top-down reform swept across the entire empire. Those aristocratic families that once had deep-rooted influence and controlled state affairs were stripped of their power one by one, no longer able to do as they pleased. Taking their place was a large group of young officials from humble backgrounds who were nevertheless brilliantly talented. They became the freshest and most loyal lifeblood of this nation. The imperial examination system was thoroughly reformed, no longer focusing solely on poetry and prose, but placing greater emphasis on practical affairs and policy discussions. Countless scholars with real talent and learning were able to stand out and serve the country. Externally, the war in the Western Territory, under the leadership of Marquis Dingbei Linyuan, achieved a decisive victory. The barbarian tribes were completely crushed, bowing in submission, presenting letters of surrender and tribute. The northwestern frontier has since welcomed a peace lasting 100 years. Internally, the Yellow River's embankments were renovated to be as solid as gold and iron. New water conservancy projects were launched across the country. Tax laws were revised, lightening the burden on farmers and cracking down on the annexation by powerful landlords. The entire Great Zhou presented a scene of prosperity, with clear seas and rivers, and peace throughout the land. And I, as Imperial Noble Consort, over these 3 years have also proven through my actions to the people of the realm that Xiao Jingyuan chose the right person. I oversee the 6 palaces, managing what was once a harem full of factions and endless strife into an orderly place with upright conduct. I established a women's school in the palace, teaching those palace maids who had no opportunity to study how to read, do arithmetic, and even some basic medical principles. I used my private treasury to open dozens of charitable institutions and relief centers in and around the capital city specifically for taking in orphans and widows. My reputation is no longer that of the recklessly behaved seductress, but has become the virtuous consort and benevolent consort, praised by common people throughout the land. Back then, those censors in the court who verbally attacked and condemned me in writing, now, when they see me, All bow respectfully from the bottom of their hearts. They know that this future empress has a broader and more benevolent heart than these so-called disciples of the sages. The time to establish me as empress has fully matured. So on an auspicious day with clear autumn skies, the great Zhou dynasty welcomed the grandest and most solemn ceremony since its founding, the Empress investiture ceremony. On this day, the entire imperial palace was immersed in a sea of celebration. Inside and outside the palace walls, lanterns and decorations hung everywhere. With drums and music filling the air, I wore an incomparably luxurious ceremonial robe embroidered with phoenixes of the 9 heavens, using countless gold and silver threads, and on my head sat the heavy phoenix crown that symbolized the mother of the nation. Surrounded by countless palace maids and matrons, I walked step by step up the long white jadestone steps leading to the Hall of Supreme Harmony. Behind me was a long train dragging on the ground, before me civil and military officials and envoys from various nations knelt on the ground like a roaring sea. And at the end of those stone steps, in front of the golden Luan hall that symbolized supreme power, my husband, the master of this realm, Xiao Jingyuan, wearing equally solemn ceremonial robes, waited for me with a smile. In his eyes, there was no longer the majesty and depth of power. There was only a husband looking at his beloved wife with endless tenderness and pride. I walked through the crowd, walked through history, and finally stopped in front of him. We smiled at each other, as if the entire world had only the two of us left. He took my hand, led me to his side, facing the thousands of subjects below. The grand historian, with his resonant and solemn voice, began to read the imperial edict of investiture. By the mandate of heaven, the emperor decrees. Every word was like the sound of metal and stone, echoing between heaven and earth. When the edict was finished being read, Xiao Jingyuan personally handed me the phoenix seal, symbolizing the empress's authority, into my hands. Long live Her Majesty the Empress, long live, long live. Below, thunderous congratulations erupted. That sound penetrated the palace walls, spread to every corner of the capital city, and was recorded on every page of the history books. I, Shen Weian, once a concubine-born daughter humble as dust, finally today became the most noble woman of this nation, standing side by side with the man I deeply love, sharing this supreme glory. After the ceremony ended, there was a grand palace banquet. The entire imperial palace was immersed in joyous songs and laughter, but Xiao Jingyuan and I quietly left the noisy crowd. Hand in hand we climbed the tallest tower in the imperial palace, the star-plucking tower, leaning on the railing and gazing into the distance. The myriad lights of the entire capital city came into view, like stars fallen to earth, breathtakingly beautiful. The night breeze gently caressed my hair and the hem of my skirt. Xiao Jingyuan reached from behind, took a cloak, and gently draped it over me. Cold. He drew me into his embrace and asked softly. I shook my head and rested my head against his solid chest. Not cold. With you here, I will never feel cold again. We quietly embraced each other, savoring this hard-won peace and warmth. Wei An. After a long while he suddenly spoke. Do you remember, many years ago, in this very palace, I granted you a favor, allowing you to choose your own husband? I smiled. Of course I remember. I still remember. At that time, I timidly asked, can I only choose from the princes? He smiled too, his eyes filled with endless tenderness. Yes. At that time I didn't understand who you wanted to choose. Who could have imagined that you, little girl, would have such audacity to point your hand at me? I raised my head, looking at his handsome profile, my eyes brimming with blissful joy. Then your majesty, do you regret it? Regret granting your concubine that favor back then? He lowered his head and pressed a passionate kiss upon my lips. No regrets. In this life of mine, I've made countless decisions, some right, some wrong, but only that one decision was the most correct and most fortunate decision I've ever made in this life. Because it brought you to me, it brought me my empire, and also brought me everything. I reached out and tightly embraced his waist. Me too. Choosing you is the only and most regret-free choice of my life. Shen Weian. We embraced like this, atop the star-plucking tower. Above our heads a brilliant galaxy, below our feet, a prosperous golden age. I knew our story had become legend, and our future was only just beginning. This empire of 10,000 miles like poetry, like painting, and we would be the boldest, most vivid, and happiest stroke in this scroll. All right, sisters. Story's over. I want to say something from the heart. In the novel, our female lead rewrote her fate with one bold choice. She got the emperor, got power, got revenge, everything she could want. But real life, there is no dragon throne for you to point at, no drunk emperor handing out pick your own husband welfare cards. What do we have? The courage to leave those who treat you like air, the guts to bet on yourself when everyone doubts you. You don't need to marry an emperor to reclaim your dignity. Sometimes the bravest thing is just to stop begging for approval from those who look down on you. Or female lead wins. Not because she chose the most powerful man, she wins because she refused to accept the person who made her feel small. Seriously, that is the real power move. Life can't be rewound and replayed like a novel, but you can choose who deserves a seat at your table. Choose well, alright. After all this drama I need to go have some tea and calm down. See you next time. Love you all.